Good evening. Good evening. I'm so glad to see that there's a packed house tonight. I'm not sure if you're here for the enrollment and class size analysis, the high school advanced placement exam, or rethinking school times, but you're welcome, all of you, to the West Hartford Board of Education meeting. Cam, if you call the roll, please.
Mrs. Blanks?
Here.
Dr. Greenberg?
Here.
Mr. Levine?
Here.
Mr. Paul Uke?
Here.
Ms. Poland?
Here.
Dr. Thomas Farquharson?
Here.
Mr. Zdanowitz?
Here.
Student Representative Gus Bacon?
Here.
Megan Striffcave?
Here.
Thank you. Gus, I think you're up, right, to lead us in the pledge?
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. We do have a slight revision to the agenda order. We're going to hear from our student representatives earlier rather than later, because it might be really later if it was later. I think maybe before the staff communications and reports. Does that make sense? Cool. Not in place of yours, before yours. Yes, we're not losing you. Okay. But for the moment, we welcome the Middle School Quest program.
I'll introduce Dr. Mary Thompson, who will come up and introduce our guests.
Thank you for having us, and I won't be before you long because we brought teachers that will actually be introducing the students. So I'm hoping that tonight will be a great night for them to share their Type 3 project that they did in the spring and really be able to answer any questions that you may have in regards to it. So again, thank you. I have teachers here, Mrs. Jennifer Hunt, and she's the Quest teacher at Sedgwick Middle School, and we have Julie O'Reilly, the Quest teacher at KP. Thank you.
Good evening. I'm Jennifer Hunt, as she said, and it is a pleasure and an honor for me to present my student, Andrew Maglio, to you tonight. He is my former student, actually. He's at the high school this year for his freshman year, and I had him for 3 years at Sedgwick Middle School in the Quest program. So he's prepared to tell you about that.
I'd like to start by thanking all of you for taking the time to speak with me today. I'm Andrew Maglio, a freshman at Conard High School, and I was a member of Quest for almost 5 years. I've been told that all of you have viewed my 8th grade History Day project already, so I'll explain a little about how Quest helped me with it and my process overall in creating it. For those of you who haven't seen my documentary yet, I'll explain it briefly. Last year, I investigated and analyzed the work of Lewis Hine, a social documentary photographer and child rights activist during the Gilded Age in America. My documentary explains how he helped to eradicate rampant child labor through his emotional and breathtaking photographs. Additionally, for those of you that aren't familiar with History Day, it is a year-long contest where students research a topic under the yearly theme and in the spring present their projects to judges. The final round, the national contest, is held each year in June in Washington, D.C., where students are given amazing opportunities like touring the Capitol and meeting with and sharing their projects with members of Congress. I've personally participated in History Day for the past 3 years, and I have firmly resolved to do so again for the next 4 years with the support of Conrad's History Day Club. I can honestly say that deciding to do History Day my first year in 6th grade was one of the best choices I've made. My first 2 projects in 6th grade and 7th grade were big improvements from elementary school as I learned more through and about the process of in-depth research, all leading me towards my project from last year. When I finally settled on my topic last year in November of 2017, I had no idea what my project would turn into for myself nor the countless others who played such a large role in helping me succeed. Like all students in both Quest and participants of NHD in general, I spent hours reading books, articles, and examining photographs. I learned to contextualize, to draw my own conclusions, and to be confident. So much of what I've used in all my classes has stemmed through my work for History Day. But my research nor that of my peers did not stop at the things that we read. Quest taught us to interview those who were directly involved or knew so much about our topics, because that was the greatest resource. As the regional contest was fast approaching, I finally got an interview with a Lewis Hine expert, Joe Manning. While I won't go into the specifics of his research, I completely believe that without the interview that Quest pushed me to do, my project would not have been as successful in the competition as it was. During every new round of the contest, I learned something new. I discovered a flaw and corrected it. I met new people and created great friendships. As I mentioned earlier, my interview with Lewis Hine expert Joe Manning was crucial. He helped me provide the insight that made my project so rich and vivid for viewers. In July, after the national contest in Washington, D.C. was completed, I met my teacher, Miss Hunt, at the Old State House in Hartford for a History Day reception. There, she showed me an email that Joe Manning had sent her so that she could forward it to me. His email explained that my documentary had truly touched him and even moved him to tears at certain parts. The last line of his email read, "Never stop being curious, never stop asking questions, always believe that you can change the world and make it better." This was an opportunity I will never forget. Like I said earlier, at the national contest in June, I was given some amazing opportunities, including visiting the Library of Congress, where I saw some of Lewis Hine's earliest printed photographs. The curator had to flip through the pictures so quickly as not to damage them. While it may not seem like a lot to some of you, as my mom says, this, quote, brought my project full circle, unquote. If you have any questions now, I'd love to answer them.
Hi, good evening. My name is Julie O'Reilly, and I'm the Quest teacher at KP. Dahlia Ahmed is the lovely young lady sitting to my left, and she's currently an 8th grader at King Philip, and the project she did as a 7th grader. For 5 months, she independently researched the traits and twice exceptional qualities of gifted women and the struggles that they experience. After evaluating her subject matter thoroughly, Dahlia created an original collection of 15 poems called The Thoughts in Her Mind. While reading her poetry at the Quest Type 3 Fair last May, Dahlia's work resonated deeply with the audience members. Her poems reflect the emotional journey of many gifted women in society. She's actually now going to share with you a poem from her collection called Why.
Why? Why can't you be perfect? Is there something wrong with you? A malfunction in your brain, a wire missing from inside of you? Why? Why do you continue to act this way, stuck in that room of yours, lying in that bed, head filled with fantasies, dreams, everything that is not real, everything that will get you nowhere, nothing that will keep you here? Why? Why do you continue to stray off this short road we call life? Why? Why do you continue to disobey, writing your own book, guiding your own way? From the second you were born, we had your life planned out. We'd already envisioned who you'd be, what you'd become. So stop writing your book, put that pen away. Don't wander off this road, get your priorities straight. Why won't you understand? We've already designed your fate. Be perfect. Why can't you be perfect? Why do you have to be the odd one out? Why can't you be like everyone else? Why not just fit in? Why be a complete and utter mess? This world is not one for dreamers, not for rebellious ones who have no fears. This world is for those who have prestigious, promising careers. for those who boast masters and PhDs, for those who conform to the laws of society, for those in reality. Those are the ones who are perfect. Those are the ones like me, the ones who work day and night until the soles of their feet bleed, the ones who will overcome every obstacle thrown their way to fit in, to get a job that'll pay even if it is one they hate. Those are the ones this world is built for, the ones for whom this world is made. Those are the perfect. Be perfect. But you won't be. Why? Why are you still dreaming? Where are you leading this train wreck? Be like me. Be perfect. Be gleaming, try smiling, start beaming, but you won't. You'll just lie there, your life in pieces, your morals thrown about like the clothes on your floor. Your mind is open, open for new ways, unlike your bedroom door. You're quick to argue, to respond, to question. Why? Why question? Just do it my way. Be like everyone else. Don't argue, don't think. Why can't you? Why can't you be this perfect little thing? Please be perfect, be normal, be the same. You're never going to win this twisted game, but you won't. You won't be perfect, you won't be enough. You'll never be strong, never be tough. You'll always be this imperfect being I see. Why? Why do you disappoint me? Every day I lose hope. Every day my expectations wither like the petals on a rose. Every day I play this sick game with truth, every day. And then I end up thinking, why did you have to be you? Oh, this question I have battled with every day. I look at everyone, I then look at myself, and what do I see? I don't see the person I have always longed to be. Instead, I see a mess, a disaster, an experiment gone wrong. I see a failure, a less than average face. I see me. I see a disgrace. I look at my mother, my father, my sisters, my brothers, and what do I see? Why? Why do they all seem so happy? Why did I have to be me? Every day of my life I am faced with whys. Every day of my life I try and try. Every day of my life I struggle to fit in, struggle to learn the basics, struggle to be like them. They tell me I am not enough, but then they tell me that I am. They tell me I should be more tough, but to be more sensitive as well. They tell me to talk aloud more and more, but then tell me to quiet down. They tell me to look a certain way, but criticize me when I look the same. They tell me to have my own opinions, oh, but make sure they fit our views. They tell me it's not about winning, but make fun of me when I lose. They tell me to get good grades and top marks at school, but then tease me, call me nerd or geek when I do. They say it's a free country, do what you want to do, be who you want to be, but then tear me down brick by brick because of who I am. In this world, I cannot be free. I am stuck in this endless cycle, in this sick, twisted game. I will never escape the whys, the hurting, the pain. I will never be enough, always remain a disappointment for all to see, always, always be forced to live a molded, fake version of me. Oh, but only if they knew what I've gone through, what I've done, how hard I've worked, all the days I've tried, the days I've trapped myself in a bathroom and cried, salty tears dripping down my face from red, swollen eyes, the days I pushed through even though I'd lost all hope, the thousands of smiles I've given to the world even though I was falling apart, the hurting I'd gone through for everyone else, the days where the only thing keeping me alive was the pumping of my heart. Maybe if they'd known all this, maybe, just maybe, I'd be accepted as one of them. Maybe I'd be enough. Maybe I wouldn't be such a disappointment. Oh, maybe I'd be perfect. Why, oh why? Stand.
Wow. I have to say, as a woman, I don't know about a gifted woman, but a woman, and as a historian, I found both of those presentations incredibly moving and powerful. And I just wanted to ask you both briefly, what brought you to your particular subject? Was there something that caught your eye, or how did you come to it?
Well, I read a statement that said that gifted females usually around my age would hide their abilities or dumb themselves down in order to fit with everyone else, and this interested me and I wanted to find out why they did this. So I did this project.
I picked the topic Lewis Hine because, well, I was already doing a History Day project. I decided on that, and I was looking at a few, but when I saw one of Lewis Hines' photos in a Time magazine, it particularly struck me. In my documentary, you guys have seen, they're really moving, and they're technologically advanced for the 1910s and 20s, and even earlier sometimes or later, but I just thought it had so much power that I could make a really good project with it.
Wow, well, I'm incredibly impressed and moved by both of you. Thank you. Other questions or comments?
I echo everything that Dr. Greenberg said. Fantastic, awesome, great leaders sitting in front of us for the future. But I have a question for both of you. You were in Quest for quite some time. And so from when you began Quest until now, what would you say were the 3 things in Quest that prepared you for where you are now?
Just as a sidebar, Dahlia she had just moved from Kansas to West Hartford last year, so it was her first year in Quest.
Oh, okay. So with your experience being in Quest, all the things that you've learned, is there any 2, perhaps 3 things that sort of like thrust you to where you are now?
Well, because usually in class they tell you what to do, like you have to do this and you have to do it this way. But in Quest, you're able to do what you want to do and what you find interesting. So this is what led me to make this poetry book.
Yeah, I definitely agree with everything she just said. Firstly, I'd say that being in Quest, it's obviously just taught me so many research skills, presentation skills. I've gotten more confident, obviously, because of it, and through all the documentaries and things I've made. It's as another thing, the research skills, it showed me that there's always more to find, and you don't have to read books written by historians. As I said, you can go to the root of the problem or the topic, and you can really interview those who were involved and see what they thought of it. And third, as she said, I just loved being able to pick what I was interested in. It. I think it makes you want to do the work and want to make it as good as possible. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, thanks for having us.
Thank you so much. We now move to public communications. I have 4 people who want to speak. I just want to remind you that we don't respond to any comments and that you have 3 minutes each, and there'll be a little yellow card after minute 2 just to warn you. So the first person that I have listed is Judy Kelly.
Do I have to turn? Oh, it's working. Good evening. My name is Judy Kelly. I live at 52 Thompson Road, and I'm here to support later start times for West Hartford schools. Personally, both my daughters would benefit. My older daughter struggled with fatigue every day due to early start times. Now that she is in college, she feels the amazing benefit of having the option of choosing a later start time to her day. My second daughter always woke up very early until she reached adolescence, which also coincided with her first year in high school. Now she also struggles to get up each morning, and she reports that students regularly fall asleep in her classes throughout the day. As we all know, scientific research explains why this happens. Teen brains are different. As parents, community members, and policymakers, it is our responsibility to listen to our teenagers and also to take these scientific findings seriously. It seems that after-school activities pose the main obstacle to changing start times. However, while athletics and extracurriculars are very important, would anyone disagree that the main purpose of school is academics? If our children aren't awake enough to fully benefit from their school day, what is the point of having them there? I strongly urge the Board of Education to start to a later start time. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we have Mary Fleischy.
Hello. Good evening. My name is Mary Fleischley, and I live at 28 Brunswick Avenue in West Hartford. I have 2 kids at Conard High School. And first, I want to thank the Rethinking School Start Times Committee for all your hard work. You've been very thorough in your analysis and your discussion of the 4 options on the table. Now to the board members and the administrators, school administration, it seems you have a tough choice ahead of you, and none of those choices will make everyone happy. I respectfully request that you consider option 2 very strongly, since it's the only option that meets the American Academy of Pediatrics recommended start time of no earlier than 8:30 for high school. I realize you may want to minimize the amount of change and go with options 2, 3, or 4. And it's true with those options, you'll get fewer complaints from elementary parents since they'll experience minimal change. But in my view, the education system is meant to serve the kids, preparing them for adulthood with minimal harm. Our education system is not for the parents, teachers, coaches, and administrators who may have to adapt their schedules. Change can be hard, but adults are very good at adapting. For the kids, this is a critical time in their development. Many of them are stressed by the pressures of academics that are, quite frankly, much more challenging than when I was growing up. Helping them get better sleep seems like the least we can do for them so they can do their jobs as students with better mental and physical health. Now, I realize you may hear some complaints from parents or coaches about option 1 and its impact to sports. My daughter is on the JV soccer team, and I'm grateful for the sense of community and the life lessons she learns being on the team. She loves her team. And I realize with option 1, she'll have to be dismissed early in order to make some of her games. But I think that's a reasonable price to pay for her getting the rest that her body needs. Missing her last period class and making up the work is not the end of the world. She has missed classes for doctors and orthodontist appointments in the past to no detriment to her studies. West Hartford has amazing teachers and curriculum, and I'm not at all concerned that my daughter will get an amazing education here. But I am worried deeply about her mental and physical health, as well as that of her friends. So I hope that you can move start times later, and I want to thank you for all you do for the kids in West Hartford. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thomas Robinson.
Thomas Robinson is just coming back from CCCs where both Conard and Hall did very well, I'd like to report. But I'll stand on my tippy toes because he's about this tall. But he sent me with a statement that he wrote a couple weeks ago. My belief on school start times. I believe that it is an average child's daily life that the thing that causes them the most harm is school. Apart from the stress and anxiety that test and work bring them, the start times bring a large amount of mental and physical stress and harm. I'm a student at Hall High School, and every morning when I wake up, my dislike for the school system grows. This is because of the irrational start times. Each night, my peers and I are faced with a difficult question with no good answer. Do I sacrifice my sleep to get my work done, or do I sacrifice my work to get some sleep? Many parents believe that when their child goes up to their room, they're going to go to sleep. This is often not the case. I have heard of stories of my peers staying up until 2 a.m. to finish a project or to study for a test. I believe that this behavior is often detrimental to the child's performance. The idea of there being work-sleep balance is just out of whack, and it's exemplified by the comments that I heard recently from a friend saying, "Dropping down was the best thing I've ever done. I can finally sleep." And he's talking about dropping down a level in the class. I believe that students should never have to sacrifice taking challenging classes that they enjoy or sacrifice their grades or their grade point average to get something close to a healthy amount of sleep. I hope that all of you believe that school should be one of the safest places a child goes, but I think with the current system of school start times, it might be one of the most dangerous places a child goes.
Thank you very much, and thank him. Oh, I'm sorry. I just need either Thomas's or your name and address.
I'm Jane Robinson and Thomas Robinson, and I live at 21 Ledyard Road.
Thank you. Thank you. And finally, Sarah
Thank
Raskin.
Thank you all. I'm Sarah Raskin, 193 North Quaker Lane in West Hartford, and I got to spend today at a conference on sleep, health, and school start times with over 120 people, including 20 superintendents, 25 members of boards of ed, teachers, principals, and one athletic director, bless his heart. There were representatives from Simsbury, Hartford, Rocky Hill, Manchester, and Enfield, all looking to West Hartford to be a leader. So I thought I would just bring you a couple lessons that I walked away with from the conference, some quotes from people there. From Newtown. After the tragedy in Newtown, we felt compelled to do all we could to improve the mental and emotional health of our students. Moving start times was one of the first ways we took to protect our children from another tragedy. We saw an almost immediate reduction in the achievement gap between higher and lower income students. We just told the coaches what time the school day would end, and they worked out how to get to their games. They came up with creative solutions, from reorganizing the way equipment was stored to moving the sports buses to the front of the building instead of the back. Don't let the coaches tell you it isn't possible. It is. After we moved start times, our athletic teams had their best season ever. From a parent, I got my child back. From a teacher, I got my students back. From a student, it changed all of our lives. From a researcher, there are very few public health interventions with so many immediate benefits. And from school bus consultants, we guarantee that for every town, there is a no-cost solution to the busing problem. We urge you to see this as a health and academic issue, not a transportation issue. And from everyone there, we were sent home with the message to appreciate our boards of education and tell them that we love them for everything that they do. There is nothing magical about our current start times. They are the product of an uninformed move in the 70s during the oil crisis. We have the chance to fix this mistake and move them back. We read every day about increased rates of mental illness, especially stress and anxiety in our youth. The evidence clearly points to early start times as one cause of this increase. So I hope that if you do come to a vote, that you will vote yes to reducing this catastrophic public health problem by moving the start times. You will be voting yes to a reduction in injuries, a reduction in car accidents, a reduction in tardiness and absenteeism, and a drastic reduction in mental health diagnoses, including substance abuse, anxiety, depression, and thoughts of suicide. Be a leader. Tell our neighbors that in West Hartford we care about the health, safety, and learning of our students. And I want to leave you with two numbers. The first is 68%. 68% is the reduction in sports injuries on the field after start times were moved later. The second number, $9.3 billion. $9.3 billion is the amount the Rand Corporation estimated would be the total cost savings if all schools moved later. Thank you very much. And if I can, I'd like to just give you the postcard from the school bus consultants. It has some information about the work that they do and information to reach them. And also the agenda from today's meeting, because it has some useful links on the back in case you want to look at them, and also the names of each of the speakers in case you wanted to reach out to any of them. Thanks very much.
Thank you very much. Thank you to everybody. We move to unfinished business, of which I'm glad to say there is none. And then new business, which I'm just going to take the prerogative of the chair to say that there is a slight bit of new business, which is that the board has started talking about whether or not we should start these meetings not at 7 o'clock, but at 6:30, in fact, to keep the evenings slightly less late than they tend to go. We're mentioning it now. We won't vote on it until November. And it would begin if we did it in January. And the reason we're bringing it up now and leaving some time is that we can't think of any problems. We've checked with teachers, we've checked with some students, we've checked with administrators, and everybody seems to be comfortable, but it's possible that we haven't foreseen a problem. So again, the plan is that we're going to vote on in a few weeks, I guess, or in a month, is to move the Board of Ed meetings to 6:30. So if you have any thoughts, please don't hesitate. Email me. There's an email just for the Board of Ed, you can email me directly, Cheryl Greenberg. But we'd love to hear if there's any problem that we haven't thought about. Okay. Now we move to staff and student communications and reports, starting with the students.
Hi, everyone. For those who don't know me, my name is Megan Striff-Cave, and I'm here with the update from Hall. Hall has been busy as ever, and here's a little update of what's been going on. The performance of our first black box production, A Wrinkle in Time, went extremely well, and auditions are already underway for our next production, which will be a comedy. Hall hosted a Link Crew conference today where 6 other schools, 4 from Connecticut and 2 from New York, joined our Link leaders to discuss the program and bond with each other. The speaker, Patrick Maurer, discussed how to create a positive and inclusive school atmosphere and motivated students to act as leaders within their community. It was an inspiring event for everyone who participated. In the run-up to the November 1st college application deadline, there are lots of events and services to alleviate some of the pressure. There is a lot of pressure. The 2018 College Fair is taking place this evening at Conard from 6:30 to 8, with over 150 colleges and universities in attendance. On Sunday, October 21st, 2018, from 1 to 4, there will be a college goal workshop to help students and families fill out the FAFSA. Finally, the Future Educators of Diversity program is hosting a college fair for students and families of ethnically diverse backgrounds, which will be held on Tuesday, October 23rd. This weekend is Hall's homecoming weekend. On Friday, we have our annual Fall Fest from 4 to 7, with food, games, and live music, followed by a home football game at 7. On Saturday, we'll have our homecoming dance, which will be from 7 to 10. I know I personally am excited to show off my killer dance moves, which I'll save for after the Board of Ed meeting to show. It is sure to be a fun-filled weekend, which will bring the Hall community closer together. Thanks for listening in.
Hey everyone. So things have really ramped up into full swing at Conard. Last Wednesday, the PSAT testing happened for the freshman, sophomore, and junior classes, and the seniors utilized the senior workshop provided by the school counselors where they could work on their college applications and essays. And there was actually surprisingly good attendance for that this year. It was already mentioned earlier, but tomorrow evening, Conard will host the Hall and Conard College Fair, and there's going to be about 150 schools. The Conard Drama Department is presenting Arthur Miller's 1953 play, The Crucible, which opens with a matinee on Wednesday, and that's going to run through Saturday night at Conard's Black Box Theater. The first concerts are scheduled next week for the fall concert for the choir fall concert on Tuesday evening and the fall instrumental concert on Thursday night. The freshman and sophomore class boards are hosting a Trick or Treat Street for safe Halloween trick-or-treating on the 26th from 4 to 6. Children in pre-K through grade 3 are welcome, accompanied with an adult. Admission is $3 for children with a canned food item and $4 without. All canned food items will be donated to the West Hartford Food Pantry. I've mentioned this before. Also, the Student Council is having a toy drive for the kids at the Connecticut Children's Medical Center. That's going to end at the end of October. The toys are going to be collected in the library. Planning is in place for the pep rally and homecoming, which will be on November the 17th, which is the night of the Hall Conard football game. Also, yesterday afternoon in the library, there was a brief meeting to discuss what I'm going to say later about the school start times. Thank you.
Okay, the joint is jumping. After the student report, can we have the superintendent's report, please?
Thank you. They stole my thunder with the college and career fair. But the college fair tomorrow night, the list of schools that will be there, this is the largest college fair in the area. There are regional ones, and this one just for 2 schools, which shows what fertile grounds colleges believe our schools are for excellent students. And with that, I'd give what I'd call the Zdanowicz report, because he always asked for this, and so I started putting it together for him, where last year's students went. And the class of 2018, immensely successful class. And the biggest thing to remember, as I tell people and I tell seniors, we're not trying to report on the names of the schools, although we know them on, we'll talk about them. We're not talking about the prestige. All we want is our kids to go to the right school. Find what's the right place for them. Visit, research, find your home, because if that's the case, once you're there, it'll be special and you will make the most of it. So with that said, the most popular school for last year's graduating class, as you can imagine, is UConn Stores. 88 of our graduates from Conard and Hall went to UConn. Another 35 are at the UConn Hartford branch, which is Mark Overmeyer Velasquez. If you want to go over there and see, I'm sure he'd give you a tour, and they've done an amazing job over there. It's a great place. The most popular out-of-state schools depend purely on your high school, which shows kind of this fascinating thing that happens where it's almost like there's a run on schools from different places. Maybe friends are talking about, or somebody visits and says, come see this. And so at Hall, the most popular is the University of New Hampshire. 8 students from Hall's last year's class are at UNH right now out of state. Fascinating, because there are 0 from Conard at the University of New Hampshire. At Conard, the University of Maine had 11 students go to. Fascinating, because Hall had 0. Second at Conard is actually University of Maryland with 9, and once again, Hall with 0 going there. So really kind of fascinating. There are plenty of schools where the split is more even. The UConn split's almost exactly even. 312 of our students stayed in state, going to 24 Connecticut schools and universities. 325 left Connecticut for college, which is actually the percentage leaving Connecticut has shrunk since the previous year. Most popular out-of-state destination, Massachusetts, 80 students at 37 schools. New York, 43 students at 25 schools. Our graduates went to 34 states and the District of Columbia. And, you know, you can imagine the states. The most popular private school, University of Hartford, 18 students. University of St. Joseph with 9 students being second. Most popular out-of-state private being Northeastern with 8. So those are the details. If people have questions, look into that. The good thing about this, and for us tracking where our kids go, is I like that our school counselors can tell our kids, oh, you should talk to this person. That's where they are. I'm sure they'd like to hear from you. And it is fascinating how things come up, because looking at applicating, this is just where people went. The number of applications went everywhere. And we had people admitted everywhere, basically, from both schools. So fascinating what choices they made. And, you know, little thing, like I said, University of Alabama has become kind of a Conard home. We've got 20 students right now at University of Alabama between 9th and 12th grade. Between, you know, freshman and senior year of college, most from Conard. So just interesting how out-of-state has built, and large out-of-state universities specifically, different from 20 years ago. The other piece of news, good news, Charter Oak International Academy received the 2018 Green Building Award of Honor from the Connecticut Green Building Council. Ceremony was October 4th. Fusco Construction was there, along with our own Juan Melian. And I do want to point this out, and I want to thank Chip Ward, who's here, and Bob Palmer's not here, Andy Morrow, who were instrumental in the construction. And it was the real first large-scale LEED Gold project in West Hartford. And as I'll remind Dave, who used to ask the question, he was just coming to the meetings or otherwise, on time and under budget. And we're able to do things that make the building a model for institutional buildings, especially with green. So just something to mention. So thanks.
Thank you. Questions? Bravo. Okay, we move now to staff reports and some board discussions, starting with enrollment and class size analysis as of October 1st, 2018, from Mr. Chip Ward.
Good evening, everybody. I'm going to try and be very quick. I have no PowerPoint for you, but we'll do this relatively quickly, because this is just a relatively simple report about what is or what was on October 1st. So compared to last year, we were down about 94 students, or about 1%, which is about typically what we've been dropping in the last 5 or 6 years. We peaked in 2010, 2011. Primary reflection of lower births that are coming into the district. We had 61 fewer students than expected, which is pretty good, only about off by 0.7%. 40 fewer at the elementary schools, mostly in grade 1 and 2, 32 at the high school, and we actually ended up with 11 more middle school students in POS than we had expected. So generally, pretty much the projections were pretty close to being on target, and we'll see what the impact of those are in late November, early December when we do the enrollment projections. The other second half of this is talking about class sizes. And this is really kind of a really boring report. Everything is pretty much on target where we expected. The elementary class sizes look great at 19.8. All class sizes are within the board guidelines at all schools. Middle school class size looks excellent at a relatively low 19.2. It hasn't been this low in quite some while. And the high school is averaging around 21.1, 21.2. And what matters as much as the high school is we take a look at when we try to balance those classes. We don't want classes under 12 or classes over 27. So we only have 10 out of our 900 classes that we schedule that are outside of that range of between 12 and 27 students. So overall, the high schools did an excellent job scheduling. The middle schools seem to be very appropriately staffed, and the elementary class sizes look excellent. So I'll be glad to answer any questions people have.
Maybe I'm the only one. As usual, I have a question. Okay. I just want, if you don't mind, just clarifying some of the numbers. On page 5, we have comparison of school enrollments. At Smith, there's actually a remarkable decrease. And since it's a magnet school, I just...
You're cutting me off.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Disconnected.
Oh.
There we go. Now we're back.
Okay, sorry. At Smith, there's a drop of 38 students, and since it's a magnet school, I just wondered what happened.
So what happened there was very interesting. We only have 24 neighborhood students at Smith in their kindergarten this year. And so we filled them up as much as possible, but we didn't get to our target of around 55 students. We're 45 students there. Similarly, at some other grade levels, we've had some lower numbers of neighborhood students. We're best able to fill them at grades K and grades 1, and we pulled in everybody that we could. So Smith is around 40% magnets now.
I see. Okay, thanks. I don't want to bore everybody with the specifics, but there are some classes that really are large, like there are classes that are over 27.
Yeah.
Especially in math, which struck me as a not particularly ideal thing. And I understand that sometimes this is just the luck of the draw, but
what classes are over 27 in math?
Page 7?
Oh, at the middle school level, yes.
Yeah, I'm sorry. And I know that that's sometimes the luck of the draw, but then I noticed that
those are the honors classes at the middle school.
Oh, really? So we have a lot of talented kids. All right, then never mind. But on table 7, which is page 10, I noticed that under world language, Latin and Greek have 5 sections of 25 each. And I just wondered, because I know sometimes it's sort of random, but here, if you had 6 sections, for example, then it would be 20 people each. So I just wondered what led to the higher numbers.
So essentially, we have one section of Greek, which has 33 people in it. So everybody who's taking Greek is in one class. So we've got Greek 1, Greek 2, Greek 2 honors, and I think Greek 3 as well. So it's really part of the teacher's effort to maintain the Greek program at Conard.
And that's really, when you get into those classes, I mean, it's ancient Greek is something, it's cool to have on your transcript. There's no doubt about it. But if in each grade there's only 6 kids, you wouldn't run it for any one grade. So this allows, and it's actually more like the introductory levels have more, but then if somebody's been in it freshman year, sophomore year, to then cut them junior or senior year, I've always felt it's kind of, you've made a deal with them that this will be there for you. The other thing sometimes with Latin, and it's not affected here, but just to remember, 6 sections is 1.2 teachers, and it can be very difficult to find a 0.2 teacher in a field like Latin. So you want it to be 5 sections or 10 sections because it's hard to go.
Makes perfect sense. I figured there was a reason. I just tend to, and finally, this is not, this is just a statement for when the budget comes around again, which is that if you look at Table 8, page 11, I noticed that the ASK program has 4 sections and an average of 10.5 students, which means there's 45 students who are being served by the ASK program. So I just,
No, there are 21 students being served by the ASK program.
So if there are 4 sections?
They're taking, it's a double period with 2 teachers.
Oh, okay,
So to be equivalent with everything else, it's a double period with 2 teachers, so there are 21 students.
21 students, okay. I just wanted the number because I know it'll
Yeah.
come up. Okay, great. That's actually all the questions that I had. I love numbers, so I had to look at everything. Other questions? No, go ahead.
Chip, I know this is going to be a difficult question, or at least I think it will be. And we always talk about it, and I don't know, I guess there's been more talk around town now than there really has ever been, but the change of households in West Hartford seems to be up recently now. I don't have any statistics or measurements to tell you that, maybe Rob does, but how will that affect your numbers plugging in, and is it just enrollment in kindergarten or preschool? The turnover that I guess West Hartford is potentially seeing with families? Is there any statistic that would show up here for next year?
So, that's really more related to when we do the enrollment projections, but so far, there's nothing that shows up to me that there's been a substantial change in the numbers of students. In other words, the turnover is not any different than it has been in the past in terms of the impact on the number of elementary students.
I guess the minus 32, I know it's only 1%, not a huge number, but I guess we see that every year, right? Private schools and such?
No, that's the reason for the decline is we had 700 births a year in 2001 through 2004, and now we're down to 580 births a year. So we're you can just, if you take a look at the grade at page page 4, you'll see that we have 635 kindergartners and 685 fourth graders, but then we have 747 fifth graders. That fifth grade class, this year's fifth grade class, was the last big cohort of births that we had. And so you see roughly in 700 to 750 students from fifth grade to 12th grade, and we're coming in with 600 to 650 students. So every year we blop off a 750 and we bring in a 650, so it's a decrease of around 100. And that's primarily affecting the lower births.
At what point do you project that this impacts us in a way that it's not just kind of status quo where it's 1% reduction and our class sizes get a little bit smaller, and do you forecast that far out and have an idea of like where we are reaching a tipping point that we have too much excess capacity or there's something else we need to do? Do you get a sense where we're at?
In terms of what? I mean, our class sizes, we have class size guidelines. So, 2 years ago we had 215 sections of elementary school, and now we're down to 203 this year, and we'll probably drop next year. So we dropped the number of elementary sections. We maintain the class sizes at the middle schools and high schools based on the enrollment, so there's not really any impact on the class sizes. So we're dropping 90 students a year. It's a relatively small decrease. The last time we had big changes in our configuration was in the 1970s. And in the 1970s, we were dropping 400 to 600 students a year.
So do you feel like if we continue to drop 90 to 100 students a year, we'll just be status quo for how long?
For quite some time. I won't be here when the status quo changes.
Can I
I
follow,
can safely say that.
can I follow up on that? Just because on page 5, where it's got comparison of school enrollments,
Yeah.
Duffy has 507 students and Whiting Lane has 251.
Absolutely.
I know that, so,
There were 615 births last year. 100 of them occurred in Duffy.
that's the water, exactly.
It's
God forbid I would ever say the R word, but is there a point where we start asking questions about rebalancing things, or?
That's really a board prerogative. I don't see that they're strong, in other words, there is no elementary school that you can eliminate without sending it to 5 or 6 different elementary schools. There's no excess space to absorb a whole elementary school. You can't even merge the 2 smallest ones together. So barring that, then you're just going to be moving kids from point A to point B. That's certainly something the board can debate.
Yeah, and I'd just say the future questions, his next presentation will be about taking these and doing our long-term enrollment trends, so those questions will naturally lend themselves then a little bit. This is about this situation. To just say one thing about that, our schools aren't designed to be the same size, and so some have bigger footprints, some have smaller footprints, some have shifted over time. The other thing about Whiting Lane, remember, that's not including the ELC. So we have the ELC that you'd add in there, which is another 100, so that shifts the equation a little bit. Too.
Yeah, and again, I didn't mean to
Oh,
be
no, I
critical.
know.
I just,
No, I know.
at what point does it shift balances, like people were saying? Okay, thank you. Other questions? Oh, go ahead.
This is a question that isn't really about the enrollment report, but it brought up a question, which is, I see we have a few classes that have fewer than 12 students in them. Do we at any point ever decide we're just not going to run this class, we don't have enough interest? Are we already doing that? And what is sort of the boundary marker for a decision like that?
Other than this, there's smaller classes that I don't show here that are either ESOL classes or basic skills classes, so ignoring those classes. All the classes that we run, we said in March, assuming we're going to get 12 or more kids. And so sometimes things happen over the summer, there are changes in the enrollment patterns, and we've already committed to run that course or X sections of that course. We built our schedule around it, and so things get tight. Obviously, in next March, when we bring the high school principals in, we're going to say sort of what happened and how can we avoid that in the future. But that being said, we're always going to have class sizes below 12 or above 27. Now, you got scheduling 900 classes. You're always going to have a small number that are either below or above. It's just, sorry, I've been doing this for 20 years. We've never had 0 and 0.
I will say, as a high school principal, one of the great pleasures when kids start coming to your office, I heard you canceled this course. And the teachers will say, I heard you cancel this course. And sometimes parents will say, I heard you cancel this course. And my answer is always the same thing. I didn't cancel the course. The students canceled the course because not enough chose to take it. And you can, so when you have a number, like say it's 10, it's a course that people believe in, you want to keep it, you want to build it for some reason, well, then you go out and you try to recruit over a 2-week period, see if we can get it to 16. At the same point, if you have a class with 6, that we just decide we've looked at the trends, it doesn't add, what we have is those 6 kids meet with their school counselor, okay, here's courses that are similar. So we have courses listed in both of our school selection guides that won't run this year, but very well may next year. And that's the other thing. We say to those 5 kids, sign up next year, hoping you build it with another 8 that sign up, and now you can run it this year, or semester course the same way.
Yeah, that's my question. So we are already making the call.
All the time.
That, if only 5 or 6 kids sign up for something, then we try to steer in a different, either recruit or steer them in a different direction, so that we're not running a class. I know a lot of school districts do that.
Yeah,
and I just wasn't sure whether or not that was something we did.
We have a very long meeting in March, as Chip said, with myself, Chip, Andy, Paul, Rick, and the high school principals, and we come in and kind of fight it out over the FTEs with both schools. How many do you have sign out? And we also track the adds to that course from that point on, and what was the enrollment on September 1st versus September 15th? Is this a course where they may have recruited, but kids drop within a week, because that's something we take into account too. So, yeah.
Okay, thank you very much, sir. Moving on to high school AP test score results with Mr. Paul Vicinus.
I'm going to introduce Paul and Ann, even though you know them, because I want to say one thing about this. Because sometimes we get jaded, and there's good questions. And this is so much a hallmark of West Hartford and what we are and who we are, that it just becomes just another report. If there was one report that the rest of the country's boards of eds would kill to be able to present or hear, it's this one. This is the one that I get calls about. This is the one that people talk about, with the question being, how do you add that many exams, that many kids taking courses, and yet your scores staying stable or in some cases improving? So I just want to say that ahead of time, that I'll jump to the end. This is a good news report.
Good evening. This is a very good news report, and for all the students behind me that chose to stay, you're the ones that'll get the A in your project. We'll bring you through, our district philosophy that I think, Tom alluded to a little bit, the participation results, exam performance. We'll definitely talk about opportunity and achievement gap, and then close hopefully with highlighting some of our students that earned distinction. Although what we'll really lead with is we're not chasing that score. We're not chasing the best results possible, an average score of 5, an average score of 4. We're chasing an experience with AP. And that's really what the College Board talks about. That's really what college admissions talk about when they talk about why AP is used as one factor, not the factor, but one factor for college admissions. Because there have been study after study that have demonstrated the experience is something that teaches students perseverance. It's something that teaches them skills. We believe in the curriculum. It's a strong curriculum, so they learn good content, but the skills that they gain far outweigh any of the facts and figures that they might memorize throughout it. And so it speaks to students, typically that finish college on time, finish college. They are the ones that have potentially had some of this experience. Also, the number one factor in college acceptance is not AP, it's not SAT scores, it's strength of transcript. And so college admission officers talk to us, talk to our school counseling director, talk to our principals and our superintendent and say, we look for students that try to challenge themselves with the most challenging courses that are available to them in their program. And that's why we have a philosophy in the district that every student should try to take a college and career ready course, of which AP represents a significant chunk. However, it's not the only pieces. And we talk about that later in the year when we talk about how the state has defined that and how we measure it as a board through your board goals. And lastly, of course, there's the potential for advanced standing, the potential to earn credit, and if that's not creating flexibility within your schedule, it's certainly offering you the opportunity either to finish college early or to take additional courses of interest. And that's what AP offers. And it is dramatic, the level of success that we're able to have. And you see the graph here. Every year I stand in front of you with this graph saying that at some year I'm going to finally have to say we no longer have yet another record-breaking year. And it's terrible to say we're on that precipice. We did not break every single record this year, but we did still have what I would qualify as a record year. The graph does demonstrate what's interesting. If you look over that 15, 16-year span, that we have more than doubled the number of exams over that period. As Tom has already said, and we'll demonstrate on another slide, with no change to average score. Now it's not possible, and this isn't number of exams, I apologize, this is number of students. This is the count of students that have taken at least one AP exam, and we've more than doubled it. Nationally, the average number of students who participate in a given school is 125. And that number has been hovering in and around that 125 for the last 5 years. If you look on the far left-hand side of that graph, you see that there's about 600, so about 100, or about a large number of students that would about 300, would have been close to double that national average. Now today, we average 4 to 5 times that national average of number of students participating. And what's interesting is we hold fairly closely to the average number. The average number of exams per student nationally is about 1.8. For us, it's about 2.15. So you see that, that significant participation rate translates into just a mammoth number of exams, 2,500 or plus exams this last year. And again, more than double the number from 15 years ago. We offer 26 different advanced placement subjects of which students can take a test. Several of subjects have a single exam, but a couple of subjects like economics offer 2 exams. Physics, you can take Physics C, or you can take Physics 1 and 2, Physics, electromagnetism, help me out, and mechanics, thank you.
Help me out. Come on. Hey, you didn't look over here.
You know, art has multiple potential exam offerings as well. So we have also students that might have a one-off. Maybe especially within our world languages, maybe they're a native speaker. So we had kind of 1 student, 2 students taking a Japanese exam, taking an Italian exam. So in total, this past year, students took part in 34 out of the 38 exams that are available from the College Board. So participation, you know, I think the point is it's not all, how do we do it? How do schools want to know the secret to our success? And the answer is we simply encourage all students to participate. It's not some magic thing. It's not this honors track only concept. Certainly exams, you know, AP exams are traditionally taken by 11th and 12th graders. So the College Board measures a statistic. This is the College Board participation rate, where they track the number of 11th and 12th graders at a high school, and they track the number of students who took an exam and that ratio. And you see our ratio over time and how it's increased, and how our 2 schools come to be the same at about 88%, 87.9% of this metric. In reality, in terms of participation rate for exams, a couple of things. We certainly offer some exams to 10th graders. We discourage 9th graders from taking exams at all. We want 9th grade to be a transition year. Some of our courses lend themselves to 10th grade, and a handful of our students are sometimes accelerated, especially in world language or something like that, where maybe they get on track a little bit early. And obviously AP biology, typically we offer that to 10th graders. But if you looked at how many kids are actually sitting in a seat in an AP class, there are 2,746 seats. 2,746 is the total enrollment of students sitting in an AP class, and of these we had 88% exam participation, which actually is a slight dip. We've always had over 90% of students sitting in seats taking tests. But we tell students, you know, we want you to try the test. It's part of the experience. We're not chasing the score. All right. Among the graduating class of 2018, 80% of all students successfully completed 1 or more AP courses. And we used to have a board goal around that. Students, and it was actually students who started with us in 9th grade, we used to try to hedge our bets. But 80% of the class of 2018 took 1 or more. The board goal, since the new state accountability system has come out, says we should chase 2 or more experiences. And so 66% of students have completed 2 or more. So it's just demonstrates the concept that this AP is not, you know, not this elite sort of a thing. In reality, if you think about it, any student who's a senior this year will be taking a college course next year, and that's really what it's about. So performance, Tom kind of let the cat out of the bag. You look at all of that growth over time, and what you're seeing there is sort of a plot of how the performance has been over time for Hall in blue and Conard in red. And overall, if you really just look at the trend, the performance has been very, very stable, with average score being above a 3.0, actually well above a 3.0. You see it somewhere near the 3.4 area, with a big spike at Conard this year and a small spike at Hall this year. Both of them had an increase in their average score. And it actually marks the first year that Conard had a higher average score than Hall. But we're not really chasing that. What we're chasing, and what we define as successful, if we can keep that average score above a 3.1, then we know that we're not overpopulating the course. because 3 is, of course, the score that's defined as successful. So you see that there, 77% of students overall earn that 3 or higher, and then the College Board publishes a statistic called the AP Equity and Excellence Rating, which is the percentage of the graduating class that earned a 3 or higher in at least one AP exam, and our AP Equity and Excellence Rating was a 58.4, very close to the highest number that we had seen. I think we hit that record last year. And as we said, higher is not necessarily better. We can chase a higher score. There's a simple way to do it. If we want to see average scores in the 4 range or the 5 range, it's simply limit the number of students who are able to participate. But that's not what we're trying to do.
In those years when you saw Hall scores that high, I mean, that's when Paul and I were teachers, and we were arguing at that point with people. They were reporting the average score publicly per class, and that was, I would argue, misguided.
And that's where I think we've seen the district philosophy, and you really see it in the midpoint of that chart, where the district philosophy really took hold to where let's open the doors and provide the experience to more kids. So what does that look like relative to opportunity and achievement gap? And I'm very excited to present these statistics. I went back as far as I could find the available data, which brought us back to 2010. I promise I didn't pick that number, with any like, oh, let me pick a lower year and see, make it look spiked. It's a very good news story that from 2010 to 2018, you see up above on the first 3 bars, the students of color, the number of students participating in AP grew from 94 students to 234. That's 150% growth. That's 2.5 times the number of students. And during that same period, I believe you see directly beneath it, you see what the overall growth in AP students was only 300. So 33% growth. So really, what did opening the opportunity for AP mean? It translated into significantly more students of color who are participating, significantly more students of color taking exams, and you see that same 2-to-1 ratio, number of students to number of exams, is constant there. 234 students taking 434 exams, so those averages are the same. And how did they perform? Their average exam score was 3.0 both times. All right, only slightly lower than the district average of 3.3 and 3.4. Percentage of students earning a 3 or higher remained in and around 65%. It actually went up about 3% over that period, in comparison to about a 2% gain over that same period for the district. But a 10% gap still exists, and it just shows us there's still more work for us to do. But overall, we're extremely excited by that growth. We're extremely excited by that achievement, and it's something I think that is the envy of many districts, no matter what lens we look at it through. So our performance statistics for our 2 high schools compared to Connecticut, which are in blue on these graphs, compared to Connecticut, which are in green, and compared to, it's global, I wouldn't say national. AP is actually a global program, which is in yellow. And so you see the trends. We're definitely a leader at both schools in terms of how we do in our performance. We've got very strong performance trends. These are the total percentage of students earning a 3 or above. With some statistics behind it that you read in the report. Some interesting things. Number of kids who took an exam. The actual number of exam takers at Conard decreased slightly this year by 2.5. As I said, the dam had to break at some point. But that's amid a 3.6 decrease in the 11th to 12th grade enrollment. So it's not a question of are the students at Conard getting tired of taking the tests? I think it's just a question there are fewer students at Conard. The number of exam takers at Hall, I think, inched up by about 1%, as did the number of exams. You see the differences in the most popular exam. Those most popular exams have remained the most popular exams. They seem fairly entrenched in the cultures of the schools. And it's of note, I think earlier I had, there's 3 exams that are just dramatic. I think it's AP Biology, AP English Language and Composition, and AP US History. When you look across, for the second year in a row, there are nearly 200 exam takers. 90% or higher participation in the exams with an average score well above a 3.0. Those are just home run courses that our students are in. In terms of home run, we had, we don't chase this, but it's good to know. It's good to report on what are some of the things, some of the highlights for the district in terms of excellent achievement. Diploma programs is one we've talked a lot about. Several years back, we were the first public school in the state of Connecticut to offer the AP Capstone program. There is such the thing as the AP Diploma, which it defines there students who participate in both seminar and research and have an array of other AP courses doing well enough on them. We had an equal number of students earning that diploma, and we had a few more seminar sections at Conard, so we have just slightly more students who got that AP certificate. For the very first time, we had an international diploma, an AP international diploma, and that's either an international student, and there's a whole array of courses that they have to take that are in and along kind of international themes, or they have to apply to an international university. And I didn't hear one highlighted in Mr. Moore's report, so I'm not really sure which was the case for our student. Then you see here just sort of increasing in the prestige of these scholars, scholar with honor, national scholars, just dramatic numbers. Most of these numbers have gone up over the last 5 years. Interesting to note the AP scholar, there's only one AP scholar, two state AP scholars, one male and one female. And for 4 out of the last 5 years, West Hartford has produced one of those students, either the male or the female. So it's just testament to the quality of our students, the commitment of our teachers, really the program. And this is not a reflection only of our high schools. It's very important to know this is a reflection pre-K through 12 of motivating students, inspiring them, and challenging them. So I open it up to questions and discussion.
Thank you. Deb, I know you had to, oh, okay. Oh, sure.
Thank you so much. This is a great report. I love all the information. I have a special place in my heart, as I've said before, for our tech ed students, or students who may not be going to college for whatever reason. And I know we've discussed before, we encourage all students to give it a try. Maybe it'll be something of interest for you. It might open some doors, something of that nature. I think of, for example, somebody who's interested in going to culinary school, maybe HVAC or aircraft maintenance, for example. I know we have conversations and even individual conversations with these students. Can you tell us a bit about how do those conversations go? What's discussed? When do we take no for an answer from these students? And if they say yes, I'm curious, what are some of the courses in particular where they might be interested?
So when you say we take no for an answer in terms of signing up for the courses?
Right. I don't
Sure.
want to take AP. I'm just going to use HVAC school. That's what I want to do.
I mean, the students vote for these classes, and I'm sure our student reps can talk to this. In December, January timeframe, they're signing up for their courses. They sign up independently, and they have an open enrollment. And then they'll meet with their counselors, who will talk to them about what those different options might be. So really, at the end of the day, it's a student vote. It's not so much taking no for an answer. It's the students electing to take it. Now, courses, a lot of the AP courses follow the traditional progression. So in mathematics, very sequential progression. We think of algebra, and you get into algebra 2 pre-calculus. That leads to calculus. Calculus is an AP offering. In world language, it's very similar to that. In chemistry, physics, things of this nature, that's a student choice in terms of what level do they want to take. So if a student's not interested in AP Chem, we have standard Chem, we have conceptual Chem. So we have multiple levels of that students can avail themselves. Stuff you're talking about really lives within our elective programs. So some students might take an elective AP like an art history, and that's usually a particular group of kids that have studied art and excelled in art for a number of years. They want to put together their portfolio. They're very interested in that, and that's their niche. They go after that. The HVAC kids, similarly, they're probably living and swimming in the CTE world. And when we do a later report, we talk about the district profile and performance report. The state college and career readiness measure says AP is one way to hit that, 2 credits or more of that. CTE is another way with 2 or more credits, workplace experience or specific technical courses. And so it's something that I'll report on later in the year when we have those available statistics. And if you like, I can probably make that more of a highlight is what are those options and what does it look like?
I do think one thing that you might be getting to also, like the classic AutoCAD, that kind of a program, you'd see a lot of AP computer science now where kids may be, you know, we think of somebody that wants to go into video game design. That's not necessarily your classic student that's excelling in algebra necessarily or things like that. So AP computer science is seeing growth. Kids that are taking a singleton that are, you know, what AP psychology is a common course for a kid to take that's maybe just taking one. It's a high interest level course with kids. They identify with it. So that's a course that might speak to what you're talking about a lot.
Nice, thanks. Where I was getting with when do we take no for an answer is, you know, we encourage everyone to take an AP. We have conversations with their counselors, their guidance counselors, and I believe, I understand that even the principal will meet one-on-one with some students. If a student really doesn't want to take an AP, it doesn't fit for me, it's not where I want to be, is it difficult for them to make that clear with all this? And I don't want to say the word pressure, but it seems like pressure sometimes.
I actually blanch at the term pressure because here's what we try to do. I have people say that, and when I talk to seniors that are leaving about colleges and everything, they don't attribute that pressure necessarily to the school or the teachers. What we've tried to get teachers to do is to tell a kid, we believe you can. Not, hey, take this course to build our numbers. That's what the special story is here. It's not about, we want to report this number, so we're saying to a kid, because I can tell you, yeah, Julio Duarte, for an example, will call a kid down, but he'll call a kid down who's never taken one, who doesn't necessarily believe in themselves because they haven't had great grades. But then when you look at their PSATs, it's something's not equating from their PSAT score to what their scores in the classroom have been. And the most frequent thing that can get a child to believe in themselves is succeeding with rigor. And by asking a kid and telling them, we've seen your scores, we think you can get in. Your question's fair, because perception's reality with people. And the idea of there's pressure, a school counselor, as a last step, if you take our school counselors and you go through and meet each one, I don't think they're pressuring that kid. I think they're the ones talking to them, because it's the same thing with saying, well, some kids feel pressure to take 5 APs or 6 APs. And that's the job of the school counselor to say, is this appropriate? It's also the job of the families and the parents to really look at it and say, what's best for you? Because any of us that have more than one kid know they're not the same. And so what is immensely pressured for one is just not that pressure filled for the other. But the benefit to this is, you know, if you perform in that advanced placement course, but we all know those kids that just, their PSATs and SATs, we don't believe reflects it, what they can do. The College Board has this AP potential report that they produce, and they send it out to all these schools across the country based on your PSAT scores. And it says, you've shown potential in all of these measures. And the College Board wants letters sent home from the principals saying, dear student, and the state actually a couple years ago started sending it, the Education Commissioner, you've shown potential in these areas. I've always been against it because we get over participation. What's shown in the PSAT for potential, I may have seen differently as the teacher than that one test showed. And so those teachers asking a kid and thinking about it is just that kind of thing. So we do take no for an answer. Your question's fair. I mean, I wish we had the time to really hunt down that. When you think about it, if we're at 20% of kids in a given class, that's 60 kids still. And I'd like them to, but if we, you know, it's really a question of, does that conversation, is it a pressure that, hey, you've got to take this? Or is it a pressure of, you can do this. I believe you can do this. And that's kind of the dichotomy that I want to be. But your point is well taken. If this isn't for somebody, the question I'd ask the child is, okay, why do you believe it's not for you? And that's that conversation that skilled counselors, skilled teachers, and parents should be having together.
Kind of a segue to what Dave had asked too is a little differently though. And this might even be for Chip too, but do we track or do we have any West Hartford students that are actually going to the technical schools for HVAC and automotive and things like that?
Do you mean going to high school, to the vocational high school?
Vocational high schools like in New Britain? And
Not a huge number. We have a couple.
We do have a couple,
Yeah,
though.
we have a
Okay.
couple.
So there is that track, I guess. That's
Absolutely.
what I was getting at.
Yeah.
An interesting story, too, is what do they call it now at homerooms? They call it something, MEs? No, advisory? There's a acronym for it, though. MA, there it is. So I was in my kid's MA, Ryan's, and his MA is in the old automotive section at KP because there's a big garage door, and it was actually kind of sad to see. I mean, the room's filled with computers, right? So that's just kind of way things changed. Because I know Conard has the automotive piece, and we lost that probably I don't know how many years ago at KP, but that's because it's not all about AP and things. And to your point, Dave, there's that avenue, and I always talk about this. If you ever read, it's in the early 90s, The Millionaire Next Door. They went into these huge areas and neighborhoods, and they found that they weren't really millionaires because they didn't have enough assets because they lived paycheck to paycheck, albeit a big paycheck. But yet there's some of the millionaires where your plumbers, electricians, your journeymen, things like that, your linesmen. So, that's what they found, and that's really kind of what the book reports. So it's not all about AP. But that other avenue.
Yeah, and just that with that auto tech, that's one of those courses. We're way more open than we used to be with kids taking a course at the other high school that's not offered. I mean, that does happen occasionally. So we try not to close it out if it works for the schedule of both places.
So I have a question also about pressure. And I think this is wonderful that we are getting more and more kids to take AP classes and AP exams. Do we know, so my first question is, do we know how many AP classes the average student who takes AP classes is taking?
Yeah, actually, I have statistics on that. I don't have them all in front of me, but I know from looking at it, in the neighborhood of 50% of students take one exam across the district, just one. And then it's something like, excuse me, it dwindles down from there. 30% maybe take two, and then smaller and smaller percentages. It's interesting that Tom and I were just at the AP conference this past summer, and the College Boards actually asked the question, which is interesting to hear it coming from the folks that give the exam, what's the right number? And I saw the president of College Board, stand up in front of a room full of people and ask that publicly, what's the right number of APs?
And what's the answer to that question?
Well, actually,
because that's what I have written down.
Yep. Paul doesn't know this. I'm actually on a panel in Dallas on this coming Monday, where I'm the superintendent representative with the president of the College Board and two university admissions officials to talk about and to answer questions about what is that right number? What are universities say they're looking for versus what are they really looking for? The idea being that one thing that's out there that's under a hashtag that I've signed on with is how many do you report to colleges? How many scores get sent in which courses, which that perhaps alleviates the pressure. My honest hope is that would have zero impact on our numbers. Because what I would want to say is, and I know that may be naive, that may be untrue, but asking the question of what is the right number, I know people very well that 14 AP exams is absolutely the right number, and I know other people that one's the right number. So it so depends on why they're taking it, what's the subject area, what's it leading towards, and underneath it, kind of what's the reason for it. If they're taking it because that college requires it, well, that depends then how that performance is going to be.
Yeah, so I guess I'm not only talking about the exams, I'm talking about the class,
No, I
which
mean
in
the
and of
course.
itself will be rigorous throughout the year. And I just wonder if we're looking at all at the mental health issues that sometimes arise when kids, and I think the pressure isn't coming from the schools, I think you're right about that, but I think sometimes the kids unintentionally perhaps pressure each other into taking more and more AP courses and AP exams. And are we looking at all at the
Yeah,
mental health impact
Our
of that?
counselors do an excellent job with that in terms of making sure that there's balance, so that in a given year, when a student is looking at their course load, they're sitting down with kids and saying, let's really assess, because it's very easy for the teacher to have kind of a myopic view. A student comes up to me and says, hey, I was thinking about AP. What do you think? And I'm, oh, absolutely, and I go to a different teacher and I have the same conversation. Pretty soon I'm looking at my caseload and I've got 6, 7. We've seen a reduction, that was spiking at Hall, I think maybe 5 years ago. We've seen a reduction in it at Hall. It's actually now Conard has more students with that. And it's a handful of students that have that, 6 AP, 7 AP course load in their senior year typically. It's literally a handful, but Hall has done, I've talked with Dan, they've significantly reduced it. Conard has a few students that are there, but I would tell you that I have every confidence that our counselors really make sure that when kids do that, that they've talked to them and talked with their parents and made sure that this is something that they know and want to do. And typically they'll try to talk them out of too many, especially, the counselors know the kids very well in terms of how they're doing, if they're struggling with school in general or things like that. So they have a sense as to when a kid signs up for that, who can handle it and who might need to be talked off.
Thank you.
I have a question similar to Dave, but I don't want to repeat what everybody else says, and sort of piggybacking off what you just said, Paul. So for me, with the freshmen, because I know freshmen don't take AP, but they're going to transition in their sophomore year, right? So they're new to the school, families are new, everybody's trying to get familiar with the setting around them. So if this freshman, because of perhaps his or her upperclassmen are taking AP and they hear all of the talk and the scuttlebutt, what really is the best way for that family and that freshman to be comfortable about looking into taking an AP course, and maybe what course? And I know the teachers play a role and the counselors play a role. But what about the families? Because sometimes you do get into a situation where you're taking a lot of AP courses, and so maybe you're in your junior year now and you're taking about 3, and then you're thinking about the exams and all the other extracurricular stuff that you've signed on for. So my question really is, how do you best advise or recommend? And I'm saying early on because, when you do something in your freshman year, you don't know what's coming 3 or 4 years later, right? And then you're looking back and kind of say, I wish I would have approached that differently. So my question is, how do you guide and recommend students and families about the best fit in terms of the outcome?
That's a great question, and I don't know if it's got an easy answer. I'll try to break it down through grades. In terms of freshmen themselves, we actively discourage freshmen, and there really aren't that many courses. There are 1 or 2, and typically it's students that are double accelerated, something like that. They're in their freshman year of high school, but they're probably taking, advanced classes already, through Quest program, things of that nature. Yeah, very, very, very few. In terms of our sophomores, if you think about the courses that are available, honors biology is one, or excuse me, AP biology is one where, and typically that's going to be your students that they were excelling in honors earth science, and they're probably thinking, hey, try this AP course out. American government, which can be some sophomores, sometimes it's a junior level class, they take a semester of American government and then they may be encouraged to follow up with AP Government and Politics second semester class. And the goal for that is, especially for students that have that interest, maybe you try it at that point. So it starts to be in that sophomore year, there's a couple of courses, maybe it's U.S. history, where you're saying, typically, if you're taking it in 10th grade year, you either have a very specific interest in that content area, or you might be a pretty strong student. It's the encouragement is coming down the line, I think, in the junior and senior year with kids who hadn't thought of themselves as an AP. And certainly in the senior year, saying, let's talk about some entry-level courses that really aren't going to be all that different than you think. There's this mystique about AP, and I'm trying to tell you, this course is accessible to you if you wanted to give it a try. AP Psychology is a course that it's a first AP course for a lot of our seniors who say, we want you to be thinking about college, and so we want you to be thinking about try this course and see what a college course might be like and demonstrate that you can. Environmental science is another one. In math, it's AP Statistics. You don't need 15 years of math in order to be successful in AP Statistics. In fact, it's the math class that a lot of freshmen take in college to kind of get that math requirement. So some of it comes down to tracks and all the rest, but at the end of the day, in terms of that encouragement that you're talking about, I think it's sort of finding that course that's accessible to any student and trying to look at some students and say, I want to make sure you're thinking about college, and I want you to demonstrate to yourself that you can do this by trying the experience.
And one of the things that we haven't talked about, neither is the board, and I think it's great that we have it. Because it used to be that you just talk about, here's the carrot, everybody, take it because you get college credit. And for parents, maybe college will be less expensive, you graduate early, or you'll get all these credits. And it is, 21 state legislatures have now passed laws that their state colleges and universities will accept a 3 or above. The thing about it is, I'm not sure I want my kids graduating college in 3 years. I wish I could go back and take a couple more. But the idea being that those introductory level courses, so when you're taking that English comp, when you're taking, AP Bio, you get 6 credits almost anywhere. And so it's actually almost counterintuitive. If you're a science person, you're starting with more advanced courses. If you're not a science person, you've taken it, you don't have to take any science courses. And realistically, what we see from our kids that go on isn't so much leaving early. It does allow maybe less courses, but it allows them double majors, multiple minors, more courses of interest with, realistically, a happier college experience with the courses that more meet what they're looking for.
All right. So on page 18 of our booklet, where you have the AP exam results, 2018 AP exam results, do you see where I am? Yeah. There are a number of exams where the percentage at Hall and Conard who get a 3 or better are dramatically different. Some of them are small, and that's just random. There's the kid who got a 5 or the whatever. But there are a couple where there are a lot of students taking it, and the disparity is significant. So I'm just wondering, is there a point at which you say, look at the curriculum, or I don't know how to frame that any.
Yeah, the point is,
delicately.
August 20th was the point when we did that.
I'll be more direct, I think, than you. Sometimes we don't have the same teachers teach a course after a few years teaching it. If we see it could be a given year, it could be not the right fit, it could be not the right match. But what we tried to do before then is, are these teachers talking to each other? And the other fact is, the student makeup of a course at one school and the other could be different just based on who's talking about it, who's taking it, what's another popular course offering. But no, we don't want to be driven by the score, but we're certainly aware of it. And we have an idea of what our scores are, what the state average is, what the national average is, and wow, we're off on this one. Why is that? And our department supervisors look at that too. And with each exam, as you know, you've been through this, every teacher gets a report on all of their students and what areas they did really well on. So for example, in AP European History, I spend time on, the Renaissance and Reformation, then the Enlightenment. You go through, and I get the full breakdown of how my kids did, so that I know that summer, you know what, I need to do more work when I teach that unit, because that wasn't where they were as strong as I thought they were going to be.
Thank you. You answered exactly the question I was asking. Thank you. Did you have any questions yourself? You asked. Other questions? Oh, please.
I have a quick comment. I'm not sure if trying to keep all of our freshmen out of AP classes is necessarily the best approach. I know a lot of people who I think could have been really good in some. Sorry about that. I know some people who could have been pretty good in some AP classes like their sophomore year, but were kind of afraid to try them because of kind of a scary feel that they have, since they don't know any freshmen taking them other than that one super smart kid. I mean, I feel like it's kind of smart. I mean, a lot of them are going to be challenging going in, but I feel like it does kind of push people out of ones like AP Bio and AP Gov when, I mean, they weren't that bad. I think more people could have done them.
It's something we talk about, and again, on an individual child basis going forward. And I have no doubt. I mean, if anybody that accused me of I'm just chasing AP exams, if I was chasing AP exams, we'd have freshmen taking courses like AP World History. I mean, I know we could have 100 more kids at each school take that exam and pass it. I guarantee it. So it's not about could they do well, it's those kids freshman year that would probably be taking it are probably going to be taking multiple over time. And for a lot of them, it would be no issue whatsoever. You're exactly right. But the transition is such that and it's something we've thought about. We've talked about this a lot. And we've just maintained that transition that year, there's so many other things involved that we've just decided that we're going to discourage it. We don't disallow it, but we do discourage it.
Thank you so much. And now for the 77th update, the Rethinking Schools Start Times Committee with the same cast of characters, Mr. Vicinus and Ms. McKernan.
Great. I won't reintroduce ourselves then. That's a great transition. And we still have a few students here, so that's terrific.
Get A's, Tom.
A plus, A plus,
You're
A
gonna be
plus,
tired
all of
tomorrow.
you. So here we are. We are here for not the 72nd, but the 5th time. And we're happy to be here. We are continuing to learn each and every day. More information. I was at the same conference that was spoken about earlier today. I was there at Trinity College today listening to many very informative presentations. So tonight's presentation, our 5th one from our team, is just a little bit different. This is where the board so last year, I'm sorry, to go back, as you know, last year we formed our committee. We met 7 times. Subcommittees met many, many other times throughout the year. And we did a variety of activities that led to 4 reports, basically. And at the June 5th meeting, you asked us to research 4 options. And that's really what our presentation is tonight. So I'd like to be able to share with you kind of feedback on what you asked us to do. Without repeating too much of what we've said in the past. But you asked us to look at an option, a board option, number 1, that would put high schools at 8:30. And that would put middle school at 8 o'clock, middle school at 8 o'clock, and put the elementary school at 9 o'clock. So the first part of our presentation will be to discuss this option. This is a 60-minute delay for the high school. There's no change here for the middle school, and there is elementary school change in this one of 25 minutes. There is a little bit of a caveat that on the Wednesday schedule, it doesn't really work well for busing. So that might have to be a 7:50 middle school start, just to make sure we have the half-hour buffer. So although, because in this option, if you think about it, what did we do? We slipped the high school into a spot, and we moved without moving the middle school. So because of that, the Wednesday didn't work as well. In this option, the benefits, and I'll be brief about these because I think you've read on and on about them, but we do get more information all the time. So we know that there's a well-documented health benefits that I won't go into, but I have links to all my other previous reports in your electronic version of your report. And although it may not be a minute-by-minute delay for the students, we are expecting students to get much more sleep in this scenario. Maybe not 60, but maybe 45, and reports will say that. That would be our high school students. And our elementary school students, there's less research about them. They actually tend to wake up pretty early, so I'm not necessarily expecting them to have more sleep time. We certainly know that the emotional benefits are clearly documented in terms of less anxiety and reduction in stress, less irritability, and many other related items. Some of the reports talked about academic benefits. At the conference I was at today, for instance, and this is I thought, a very memorable point last year in our discussion. Wilton is not claiming any academic benefits necessarily. I think Cheryl heard that as well. But Newtown put it pretty well last year when they said, we're not chasing academic benefits. That's not our purpose in doing it. So some studies say there are. Some studies will say, well, maybe. Wilton says we're not seeing anything. But also we learned today, Sharon, Massachusetts presented today, and they did see some good reduction in issues related to attendance and chronic absenteeism. So in a summary of our benefits, much of what we said last year with just a few updates here. Our challenges, again, we reported them last year, but it's important as you approach your decision that you're aware of all of them. We do have concerns about learning loss of time for the dismissals of students from the afternoon to attend both home in some cases and many away contests because of the start time. We are aware that there is a default start time to athletic contests. If the two schools can't agree to move later, there's a default start time of 3:45, which would be hard to get to because we'd be dismissed at 3:15. We are concerned about some participation rates in some particular sports, especially those sports that use non-school facilities where we cannot dictate the time of use. These are fee-based facilities such as Rockledge. They have to make money to operate. They cannot necessarily accommodate. They have not indicated they can accommodate. Cornerstone, to a lesser extent, veterans. Hockey's already at kind of crazy times, so it might affect them some days, but not all the time. But we have to be aware that there are many athletes on those sports and their participation. We also have some concerns about kids who like to do more than one thing. They like to be in their sports after school, but they are also in performing groups at night, and that time is going to get crunched. Kids who like to participate, and they're talented, let's say, in music or in the play, acting, or in stagecraft, but they also are on a team, and so that there'll be some conflict there. There's a concern here also with the elementary schools getting out at 3:45 or so. We do have to be aware of civil twilight. Kids who take elementary school buses, I'm not sure exactly what time their drop-offs is. I think their time on the bus is under 30 minutes, but they could be getting off at 4:15, walking home. November, December, January, it is a concern that we're starting to hit that civil twilight hour. This could be as early as 4:19 in December, but all in those months, it's around 4:30. So just a concern there.
Only because I worked on this on something else, that the time that kids have to walk home and have to be done during daylight hours. Are you talking about that as well? Because then we would have to bus those kids. For instance, right now, it would be, 1.5 miles, is it?
1.5 and
1, 1.5, and 2. So when that daylight time changes, those kids will fall under the state law that they'll be walking during dark times in which they can't. Am I articulating that correctly? There's a time that by state law that they're not supposed to be walking. and
It's
you'd have
not
to bus
actually
them.
state law, or else open choice wouldn't work. Is it something that we want to do, and is it it's suggested? I mean, it's a question of.
It's a state suggestion then, because it's in our policy.
Yeah, that's exactly it. It's not law. None of those are laws. They are strong state suggestions. And there's the question about, and that's the idea of moving earlier with the elementary kids. Do you want our youngest kids walking during times where it's still dark? So, yeah, that's a consideration.
So we know that will be a few months, so it's not the whole year by any means, but we do want to make you aware of everything that we'd have to account for if we make this change. One of the other things, in terms of the schools we heard from today, the Greenwich Public Schools had a difficult implementation last year with 8:30 school start time. And this year, they've implemented an interesting schedule to account for that. So this year, so last year, their schedule was exactly this. It was 8:30 to 3:15. And they had some difficult implementation. We talked about that last year. They had to make some midstream adjustments, so we'd want to prepare for those kinds of things if we underestimated anything. They, this year, decided to put an opportunity block at the end of their day. So from 2:45 to 3:15 is called the opportunity block. Their athletes are dismissed at 2:45 who have competitions, practice. From 2:45 to 3:15, their students are in school. Mostly they can seek extra help. They're starting to allow clubs to meet. I think this year they'll be figuring out exactly how to use that well. That's what I could make out from today's presentation. So so after trying this schedule, they did make a change, and I want you just to be aware of that because it's something you want to account for.
Excuse me, just to understand, so the change was not, they didn't change the 8:30 to 3:15, they changed that the last block is now not a class. Is that correct?
Their instructional time.
Oops.
You're on the.
Yeah.
Their instructional time used to be 8:30 to 3:15. Now their instructional time is 8:30 to 2:45.
So they've reduced their instructional time.
Right. But they didn't change the 8:30 to 3:15 physical. I just wanted to understand what the change was.
Right.
Gotcha.
That's what I was trying to understand today. I was asking some questions about that too.
Not teaching.
Right, so they have a shorter instructional day.
They shortened their instructional day.
They've essentially moved, I mean, they're dressing it up, but they've made 8th period study hall for all
Right.
students.
Right.
I don't know if they have study hall during the day, though. That's a question I wasn't able to answer. Do you have study hall during the day and 8th period study hall, or did, I wasn't able to get that today, but.
Town is that again?
Greenwich.
Anyway, I'm sorry to interrupt. I just wanted to make sure I understood.
Sorry.
So.
Yes, so the students who are not released who are not released for sports, release at 3:15, but their last half hour. And they said today in the meeting, they're still, determining which clubs could meet or if the kids could be released for jobs and other things. But it seems as though this year they're determining that. Another unknown I wanted to bring up is, and I'm sorry, were you about to say something?
No.
Okay. Another unknown is when we were doing our research last year and we approached daycares, scouting, maybe I'll say dance groups or karate or all of the things kids like to do, in our town businesses and Ys and YMCAs and JCCs and all of that. When we went out to them, they said, you tell us the time, and then we'll give you more impact. So we have not gone back out to them at this point. And so that's still a little bit of an unknown. If we were to follow this option, and I only put the major steps, there's probably another 100 small steps that you don't need to be worried about every detail. But first of it, I put at the top of the list any safety concern about the younger children walking home in those couple of months. and what would happen with crossing guards or directions for them, and do they have to be on longer? I know there are some elementary school after-school programs, such as chess clubs. There's Brave, which is a girls' kind of empowerment group, and there's other things like that. So we'd have to take into consideration that.
If I could jump in here. So this is where I would say, one of the other charges you gave us, and this applies to option 1 and 2, was to communicate with our private schools in town, private and parochial schools. And so I communicated with all of them during the summer, most of them with a letter, just explaining everything, because there wasn't really a need for a follow-up because it didn't fall into conflict. And we had talked about possible transportation issues. Once we dug down further, and I can't say this enough, our partners in the private and parochial schools were great in conversations with me, talking to them, open about looking at things. We've come to basically and this is, so I'll present a worst case scenario to you. It doesn't mean this is a likely scenario. It's if we did the exact same thing right now. There would be 4 runs in conflict, 4 total bus runs in conflict, so the cost would be $94,012. Now, that doesn't mean that that's a likely cost, because there could be shifts. We haven't mapped the bus routes with next year's. We haven't, Chip, Andy, and I have sat down, looked at a lot of them. Chip and Andy are actually meeting with our bus contractor on Monday to look at a lot of things with all of our bus routes. So I'm not presenting that as a discouragement, encouragement, and I agree there are companies that do school bus consultation. I will say the one difference is West Hartford is unique almost nationally in the number of private and public schools. And the fact that we do control a lot, but we don't control some others. But that being said, I'm optimistic that cost would be mitigated. But I can't make a promise, and I won't, because I just want to be honest.
And is that 4 runs and the 94,000 true for both 1 and 2?
1 and 2, it's true for both.
So it doesn't matter which?
Doesn't matter
Okay,
either one.
thank you.
Is there a cost, we had talked about last year, that there's a Board of Ed cost and there's a town cost. So would the town have a $94,000 expense?
Yeah, I'm including that as the overall cost. It would depend on how you build it, whether you build it to the town or the school. Eventually, it's all the same pot. So that's something we could talk about in the budgeting, just on how it was looked at. It depends if you bill us for it or if you bill the privates for it.
But it's just the 94, it wouldn't be 94 each?
No, it's 94 all baked in.
On this option, yeah. So another question we had hoped to get an answer on was the capacity of the before-school programs, if elementary school is going to start later. Did you have an opportunity to talk to the before-school programs about whether they could take in more students and how many they could take in?
Yeah, we've talked a little bit to them. A lot of them, the answer here is it depends on the place. There are some places with openings that would be able to take more, and there are others that are basically all full up. So, for example, Charter Oak has a vibrant program. They're pretty much full up, so it wouldn't be an addition. Would there need to be more? That's a question we don't know either. We don't know. There's an assumption there would be if you will go 15 minutes later, but it's kind of a mixed bag. The answer is really it depends.
Okay. So most of the options here are things you can imagine: changing bell schedules, looking to see if you could mitigate for teacher coaches near the end of the day, at least semester by semester. They don't all coach all year. We'd want to develop some guidelines for teachers about if athletes are missing a good amount of work. Of course, the normal things, we would reschedule all of the buses. We'd communicate all of that. We would work with our athletic director to schedule everything home and away as late as possible in affected sports. There are some sports that are not affected at all. There are some sports that are under the lights already. That tends to be the varsities, or they're indoor sports like volleyballs and things like that.
The biggest challenge in makeup work for students, and I agree, I have every confidence in our teachers, the biggest challenge is science labs, because they can't just make it up on their own. The teacher has to go in, set up the experiment again, supervise the experiment again, so that's the biggest challenge for 8th period.
Also, in our physical education classes, kids actually go and make up physical education classes. They don't write a paper. They actually have to give other time to that. So it's another makeup that's a little bit of a challenge. The use of the non-school facilities for certain sports is a big one to overcome, because the initial feedback is, no, we can't move. We would go and we would re-request. There's other scenarios where their practices would be cut dramatically short. They would be released for, we have counted them in the number of groups that are released for games already. It's not an addition, but that would be really important, because that's definitely boys and girls swimming, and those are, those teams have 60 or more kids on them, and 40, 50, 60 kids depending. That's somewhat hockey, boys and girls, and then certainly golf is a big one. So we'd have to figure that one out. I think it would be important to prepare for midstream adjustments, just in case anything exceeds our worst-case scenario expectation. And that is, I think, just important for us to start thinking about early. And then, of course, communication is going to be enormously important to everybody in every form, in terms of updating everything electronically, doing phone calls, and making sure that we get our information out. And that is a kind of overview. I mean, there's many other things, but I think these are the things that are most important for the board. If we move on to scenario 2, you asked for something around like a 8:15, and so when I say this is approximate, because buses have to work here, and originally we thought maybe we could do the elementary school or the middle school at 7:40, but I'm saying anywhere in about a 5 or 10 minute window around here, because we just have to make sure with these new bus runs, everything can be done in the 30 minutes, and some of it starts to get a little bit tight. So in this scenario, high school could be 8:10 or 8:15-ish. They would get out at 1:35 on Wednesdays.
Yeah, middle school is kind of 6 of one. I mean, I think, we'd like to see middle school, in all honesty, 7:40 to 2:30, and so that's something else we just have to kind of work with the buses and the time in between the routes.
Can I just...
7:45.
That's what I was going to ask. Since you said, I believe you, but I'm just confused, because you said that we need a half-hour difference, so 7:45 would be a half-hour. You're saying we need more in that case, or?
Well, I just wanted to make sure I guess my message to you is we just would want to make sure, these, I don't want to say 7:45 and 8:15, because what if we needed 7:40, and I just want to,
Yeah, it's kind of we're operating under the, let's give a worst-case scenario with the other likely. I'd say this is likely that you could do this at 7:40 to 2:30. It's also, if you did so there's also 8:10 to 2:55 for the high school, if that worked with 7:40 to 2:30. So there's kind of 5-minute fungible each way to maybe 10 minutes fungible. It's a question of, the runs aren't exactly the same. Starting at the high school is kind of easier than starting at the middle school, but, yeah.
And currently, the time between the middle and elementary is 35 minutes. And so, here in this scenario, I have the high school 8:15 and then 30 minutes to the elementary. So I guess what I'm trying to convey is just that there could be small differentials, but this is like a theme of getting the middle school a little earlier and the high school around the 8:10, 8:15 mark. In this scenario, the benefits and the challenges are largely the same. There would not be the same amount of sleep gain for the high school children, because you're delaying now 40 or 45 minutes. We did hear today at the sleep conference that, Newtown delayed 40, so I think we could expect about what Newtown gained. They went from 7:20 to 8 o'clock. So we could, in talking to them, and they feel their children are sleeping more. They reported they like their change, so I think we could. So the benefits and challenges are largely the same. The steps are largely the same. The biggest difference is the middle school children now, who are also, many of them are adolescents, are earlier. In the high school, all of the kids fall into that adolescent category. In the middle school, many of the kids do, you know. So that's one thing that is different, is that those children are not getting more sleep. They're getting less sleep.
And can you just tell us what's the improvement in the number of students who don't have to miss 7th and 8th period? I mean, does that
Well, in
must
our-
shift too,
yeah,
right?
In our athletic board report, we said our worst-case scenario was 262 if we did an hour, and then there was another number for the 8 o'clock. We didn't do an 8:15 scenario in that report. We did half hour in that. So I think if you look at those two, and I think it was more like around 220 that could miss. And again, those were applying the exact same standards. We would still go out and call all of those schools. We would still try to move things to Wednesdays. We try to move some more things onto the fields. We would make all those adjustments. But we had a number in our athletic report that said 220 at about 8 o'clock and 260 at about 8:30. So
Okay, yeah, all I meant was that, am I correct? I mean, of course, I would prefer 8:30. I understand that's where the science is, but am I right that 8 o'clock would ease some of those conflicts?
Yeah, if we're out, if you're out of school at 2:55 or 3 o'clock, that makes 3:45 likely for home, so zero impact on home. It makes many away games likely. I think it's more likely that, and we use those numbers based on no changes. I think it's more likely for other schools and athletic directors to say, we'll move it 10 minutes or 15 minutes than it is for half an hour. And it's also, when you're in that time period, and I don't want to overstate this because I do think it gets overstated, and I'm trying to be honest about every challenge and every benefit. It's a short period with daylight savings. It's a short period right now, but that is a realistic time where for your younger sports, your freshman and JV teams, it would be more difficult. But yeah, but certainly that mitigates the athletics issue.
And then there would just need to be a new middle school schedule. And a lot of that is just shifting and adjustment. It's not necessarily, we're not trying to implement a new general schedule. The third option, if we can switch over to that, you asked us to look at, is what would happen if we flipped professional learning to the morning? And this is one scenario we came up with where we would keep all of our times Monday through Friday for everybody. I mean, Monday, that should say Tuesday, Thursday, and Friday. And then Wednesday would be different at the high school and middle school level. And that might look like professional learning in the morning for 2 hours. Remember, our professional learning on Wednesday afternoon is 2 hours for each level, from 7:15 to 9:15 for the high school teachers. They would leave their sites because they're not always in their own building. If Conard and Hall are meeting together, or 6 through 12 English is meeting together, they might be across town. They would leave that site at about 9:15, and they would make their way to the high school for a 9:45 start. And the middle school would be the same. The middle school teachers would come in about a half hour into the meeting. They would stay in that meeting. They would stay to 9:45, and the middle schools would start at 10:15. That would keep the 612 academic departments together. And the elementary would be the same. The people who suffer in this is the K-12 departments. So that's, and I think I have all of them, but Paul will correct me, that's art, could not meet together, music, physical education and health. There's a lot of related services like school, not some school counseling, but so special education certainly.
Technology, school psychologists.
Yeah. So those groups would not be able to meet as a 6 through 12 team, K through 12 team. And outside of that, there's 3 days in the school built in our calendar, and one has convocation in it, and one they want to be in their buildings to set up their rooms, their offices. So when you look at the remaining 3 days for them to meet, a lot is already taken care of. So half day of convocation and at least half day in their buildings for their building meetings. So that really leaves very little time. So we anticipate that there'll be requests to meet as a K-12 team occasionally during the year, which will necessitate substitutes and therefore loss of learning time from a certified assigned teacher to that classroom. We don't know that impact, but it would not be unrealistic that we would want to grant some of those so those teams can operate efficiently and keep making continuous improvement. Certainly the advantages are, the advantages are students would pick up, the adolescent student would pick up 2 hours and 15 minutes in the middle of the week when they're tired. Now, we didn't research any studies. We didn't find any studies that said, what's the effect of delaying it 1 day a week? So I can't speak from that point of view, but I can say in the middle of the week, your adolescent student would get to kind of like a sleep-in day. And that might have some positive benefits. I'm not sure.
Can I just interrupt right here, because I was at the same meeting you were, of course, this conference, and actually that they addressed that question specifically, which I was really surprised. I had never realized, but the sleep specialist professor person, doctor, whatever she was, anyway, she looked at that exact question and she said that it's actually counterintuitively, it's worse for kids because it throws their schedule off yet again. The same reason that sleeping in on the weekends changes your schedule, that your circadian rhythms get off even more. And so I had that really surprised me. But so I only learned that today, so I just wanted to pass that on.
Absolutely. But you did want us to look at this, and there would be some gain. I don't know the circadian rhythm being interrupted on a Wednesday, a different pace.
Chime in one thing, the big concern I have on this one just remains if I've got a 5th grader and a 6th grader, and all of a sudden I have to have one plan for the morning for one child, one plan for the afternoon for the other child. And it's untested, it's unmeasured in terms of how many of our parents are that way, but that's the part that scares me the most.
This would, a lot of this is, again, developing new schedules. Certainly Wednesday would be a lot different now. The planning for the K-12 supervisors, making sure they have what they need to make their departments run efficiently. Certainly we're probably moving develop a home competence schedule that minimizes Wednesdays, because now we're later on Wednesdays. And scheduling back to scheduling of sports around our calendar. The last option is to make no change, and the challenges here is our students wouldn't get the benefits that we've been talking about for over a year. There would be no sleep benefit in this scenario. We would keep things exactly the same. There would be no other challenges. We know how to operate this schedule, but there would be no great benefit to our students. I mentioned in the report there are some things I would start working on, such as the high school graduation requirements, which are coming. But other than that, that we don't see anything you would need to know. I do want to take a minute, because although the committee didn't meet with me during this school year, they met quite a bit last year. I think this concludes their work, and I think I can officially send them a thank you letter and conclude their work and kind of dismiss them officially. They did put a lot of time in. I can tell you they were very open-minded people, and I think they really wanted to listen to every possible angle of what to do. What they really, I think, were worried about is, sometimes when you're presenting the challenges, it sounds like, oh, am I talking against this? But they also don't want to have the experience where we have to make so many mid-course corrections in the future, and you have people who may be angry. Sure, it's going to be disruptive. It's going to, you'll always have some people who might be upset, but we don't want to have to make a big change again. We want to anticipate as much as possible and give you as much information as possible, because it's a big change for a lot of people, and change isn't easy for people. So I want to thank them, because they didn't just put in time. They really put in thought and effort.
If I could, we've thanked Dan before, but I especially want to point out one thing that I think is really important. From when I first tasked Dan with this, I said one thing: be open to everything, report everything. because I don't want anybody, I get a lot of people ask me, what do you think? What do you think? And I always say the same thing. It doesn't matter what I think. This is a pure board decision. And we will implement whatever the decision is, whether it's the same or otherwise, the way West Hartford does. We will do it with fidelity. We'll do it with students' best interests in mind. And I honestly believe that it was really important for Ann not to be seen as, well, we're trying to skew anything. And I think she did a really good job with that. And I just wanted to thank her publicly for it, because this is a relatively thankless task. Other than that, one little thank you.
Lots for us to talk about. Can I just ask a question before we move on? And I know you're never supposed to ask a question you don't already know the answer to, but I'm going to do it, which is, I totally appreciate what you're saying, that this is our call. But we are not specialists in all these areas, and your committee, in a way, was. I mean, you had lots of different representation. I don't want to put anybody on the spot, but was it the sense of the committee in the end that it was worth trying, or that this was a terrible idea, or?
No, I mean, am I on? Yeah, sorry. No, I mean, the committee was very interested in they thought the health benefits were compelling. The question is finding the sweet spot without disruptions. So they were not, I would listen and really, think, oh, this group will be against, or this group will definitely be 100% for 9 o'clock, or something that will be even more challenging to implement. And I didn't get that. I got what's best for the kids, where can we find what's best, and where can we find what's best, and balance that with what we can do. And I think, listening to some of our districts in the area, Wilton has done this successfully at 820 for 10 or 15 years. Newtown is really pleased where they are, and they feel they did the best for Newtown. And I think you heard some of that today. And, Greenwich had a different experience, but everyone is trying to do the best for their town, and I think our folks were the same. Where's the best spot for West Hartford given our configuration? But they were very open to, and I think you saw that in the survey too.
Thank you. I know lots of us have questions, but Gus, I believe that you had a report on this, on a discussion that you guys had?
Oh, yeah, I'll be brief, but I think you guys saw the results of the poll they did last spring, but the majority of the students do want a later start time, ideally around an hour. I mean, I've been, I'm there every day. I've seen after things like the PSAT testing, SATs, when we all go in late, I mean, people are generally happier, more alert. They pay more attention on those days, or when there's a snow delay. I mean, I think it's the best thing for the students. I mean, the only thing that, you've mentioned a bunch of things, but I don't think it's worth it to keep us coming in super early just for sports and football. We personally feel, me and a lot of students at Conard feel that it'd just be best if we could have another hour in the morning. And sorry.
Thank you, and thank you for your input. I'm sorry to have kept you so long.
So, interesting comments today. But someone, they don't care about sports. Just kind of, these are your students, your fellow students, your people that you sit next to every day. Sometimes you are taking the stress from one side and putting it on the other. You need to balance that. And, we actually heard a little hyperbole today, suicide and mental health, and high school is a dangerous place, we heard. Irrational start times. Listen, if we could save one person's life, we would do this. But that's not what we're here. We're not talking about the suicide rate here in West Hartford for start times. The sun goes around. Well, we go around the sun every year. It takes a year. And the summer solstice always happens on the summer solstice. And the winter solstice always happens. There's absolute exactness to it, minus those few seconds that we have to correct every 100 years, or whatever it is. We found that grades don't suffer from first period to third period. You reported that. So I forgot what class you used, but you used the AP Chem, I believe, and the first period and third didn't suffer at all, 0. You know, the mental healthness, we have an increase in mental health, and we're going to attribute it to the times of high school and school start times because it's an increase. Summer solstice and sunrises and sets the same time every year, every day. And now we have an increase in mental health awareness or mental illness because of school start times. I find that hyperbole, quite honestly. Adolescence, we talked about that, and it's always talked about, and it starts at different times for different kids. But your physical and psychological changes, and I told you I talked to pediatricians, and I looked it up online as well, your psychological and your physical changes take place between 9 and 12 years old. That is where those things place. Yes, it's true, you still go through adolescence through your 18, 19, but your greatest impact is between 9 and 12, and we're talking about high school start times. And the science. Well, the science is between 9 and 12 years old. So why don't we address that? I don't know. We're not really addressing it. Grades don't suffer. We have more accolades in West Hartford than ever before about our school system and how we succeed, both in the classroom and on the fields. You know, we have some very competitive teams out there. We have some very competitive students out there. And we are at the top of our game, both academically, and I'll just leave it there, academically. We get all the accolades. You guys were at convocation, you heard what I talked about, and where we rank in our schooling. So, you know, no one's talking about the middle school kids, and that's where, you know, your physical and psychological changes really take place. It's all about the high school. But yet, we have more mental illness in our schools, but yet clocks haven't changed in millennium. You know, I talked about taking kids out for orthodontists and doctor's appointments. I do the same thing. I don't take them out of school for those things. I just don't. We're going to have an increase in high school graduation requirements. We have to think about that as well. I hate when, it just bothers me, hate's a strong word, it bothers me when they come in and scare tactics with the hyperbole. It's just, that's not what we're doing this for. We're not doing it to, you know, the mental health increase or the suicide. You know, there are health benefits, right? But because we have an increase, we're blaming it on school start times. I just don't see it. And when you take a group of people from one side that have issues getting up early and passing it down to the stress of taking kids out earlier for sports, where's the balance? You're making one problem into another. You're not solving anything. Usually when you look at your decision-making process, you want the best case scenario for the masses, not just one group. And you're affecting a group that potentially could have more stress put them on them. You know, we talked about, I'm not going to mention that, but we'll leave that one offline. But, you know, when I hear the school's a dangerous place because of start times, I almost want to close down public discussion of it because it's just, it's the wrong way to approach this group. And I just feel that, you know, this town, these teachers, we do such a great job here in West Hartford, and to call our schools a dangerous place because of start times just upsets me, and I apologize.
All right, so thank you for the update. I just want to respond to what has been shared and just to comments made. I appreciate the comments that were made at the beginning of the program and now. I do think we have to be careful, though, in referencing information shared in terms of increased mental illness. I did not take the information shared as being stated there's an increase in mental health concerns because of the current start time. I take it as there is an increased awareness of mental health concerns that likely were already there. I think just in many areas, in many subject areas, when people speak of saying there's an increase, we have to be careful. I think it's more so people are more aware and talking about it. Also, in terms of the science of it, and I just want to, Mark, I want to make sure I'm hearing you correctly. You spoke of, from the research you did, between the ages of 9 and 12, you hearing information. Those are pivotal years?
Those are the times where your physical and psychological changes are at its greatest and the greatest impact during adolescence. And that comes from both online research and pediatricians that I spoke with.
I respect that information, but I also respectfully challenge it as well. We know in terms of the brain function and brain development, the human brain does not fully develop until the mid-20s. So we know during the period of adolescence, the amygdala is the part of the brain. That's where the emotions are. That's the part that is strongest. So I think that in terms of the point in which growth and development is happening, the age range is a bit longer than that. But I do respect, again, the information that's been shared, and I just want us to be careful that we don't want to stigmatize talking about the presence of mental health, mental illness, as if it's something that is wrong or something that should be shamed. It is something that is there. It's something that many people are present. I'm not saying that that's what you were stating, but I just think when we talk about that, we need to talk about it from a more open-minded perspective in that it is present, and it's something that we want to address and treat in many areas, which is why this is a subject in terms of rethinking the school start time, one of the benefits possibly that it may contribute to.
I want to clarify my statement is that it was said that I didn't say those, it was increased in mental health, and I understand that the awareness, and we do a lot of things in West Hartford to mitigate those mental health issues. But when you wrap your arms around the school start time, that being one of the divisive pieces of mental health, I have to question it. I agree that there's an increase in more awareness, and that a board that looks just like this gave more money to the town to help with mental health, and I was part of that vote. So I'm very aware of it. I just don't like it wrapping around and talking about school start times being one of the larger issues of that. And being, when you have an argument about school start times and you lead with the mental health issue, I just find that I think you need to be careful on how you articulate that piece.
If I can just join in, I think what you're saying is that it's not a question of, that the argument about mental health and physical health too, I assume, is not is that whatever the level is now, and we have concern about it, that it improves as students get more sleep and can sleep a little later. I actually took pictures so that I could send it to everybody of these very complicated charts about circadian rhythms and all that kind of stuff. But the point was that, and you're absolutely right, it is adolescence on, but it continues that the timing of the brain sleep patterns is such that when you make kids wake up earlier, which we do, right, that they have more struggles emotionally than if you let them sleep the way their most adolescent brains need to sleep. So that, I think, is the difference. It's not that anybody's saying that we have the situation is worse now because of start times. I think the argument is the situation would be better if there were later start times. Again, that may not be compelling, but I think that's what the science is arguing. Is that okay?
So all this talk of sleep is putting me to sleep. So I just want to say that I think I said at the first meeting of this, and I want to reiterate that I have a personal conflict with everything because I don't like getting up early. My wife wakes me every day between 6:15 and 6:30 based on what my son's going to play at middle school. So that being said, it's tough for me to sit here and say that I don't agree with changing the start time. I think we probably can all agree. I'm trying to cut to the chase because I don't want to be long-winded, but the Wednesday option doesn't seem like a viable option. So I think we're really talking about option 1 and 2. And I just feel like our speakers not only tonight, our public speakers, but the ones that have come throughout the course of the last year. The one problem I have with them, I admire their passion and their dedication to the research that they looked into. I just have a growing concern that it was always painted with a broad brush of this is a unifying benefit to all of our students, when there was plenty of anecdotal stuff we heard throughout the year via emails from people or comments, that that's simply not the case, where there are early risers that have no trouble getting up in the morning. So to say uniformly that all kids will benefit from extra sleep is simply untrue. I mean, whenever you try and say that about anything, like, we're all going to win big at the lotto. I mean, it makes you kind of, at least for me, take a step back and be like, I just feel like I'm being sold something. Also, based on your presentation tonight, I feel like you made some excellent points about there are just a lot of things that we have to consider that are still unknown. There are a lot of unknowns. There are a lot of things we do know now, thanks to your work, but just specifically mentioning how we don't really know how some of the after-school activities will react to this. And while that may not be a financial expense, it will certainly be an expense to how people, our student population, can participate in things and how that affects families. You can't just say, again, with a broad brush, like, well, the scouts will be okay, or the running, the middle school cross-country team will be able to adjust to this, no problem, because darkness matters. You can't run in the dark, it's dangerous. So also, it was an eye-opener to me that some of our facilities that require the income for the off-location sports simply cannot handle either one of these changes. These might not be big dollar impacts for us, but again, these are big impacts to actual people's lives in this town. So again, to say with a broad brush that we can just move back an hour or move back 30 to 40 minutes for high school simply is not something that's going to have a minimized or minimal impact on people. There's a lot of kids that participate in these different after-school activities I've just mentioned that will be impacted if we make a change. Lastly, I want to say, and Mark has already talked about this, I think some of you other folks have too, and I think it was great that we got an update on your presentation on the test scores on the AP exams and how wonderful we're doing. It goes so well with this, right? Because to me, it's certainly overused, but if it ain't broke, don't fix it kind of guy. Where obviously we are excelling, and I mean Tom and everybody loves to tell us how great we're doing. And it is great to hear that this school district, year in and year out, continues to break records, continues to outperform all of our competitors, and we want to potentially throw an unknown change into that with the change of start times. So if it was more cut and dried that there was no financial cost, there were minimal impacts to not only sports, because I know some people are like, well, academics are the most important thing, but I think we could sit here in different meetings and hear the enrichment argument that, well, academics are important, so are sports, so are after-school art programs, drama programs, chess club, that all these things are potentially going to be impacted, folks. So that's another one. And then again, the broad brush of all the kids get any extra sleep benefit is simply not true. So it doesn't seem cut and dry to me that we can make a decision to move this back and it's a universal or largely significantly a majority benefit, because I'm all about the majority. So even if we do surveys or whatever and a majority says they want the change, I'm not sure that's representative of the actual populations that will be impacted and therefore affected in a negative way. And I think those are the things as a board we really need to think about. I'm all about the finance, right? I mean, I'm that guy that drives Tom crazy all the time about, the dollars and cents. I know it. But to me, this goes way beyond that, way beyond that. So I think we have to carefully consider, and I admire Sarah and all the other folks that have come in for the past year talking about the science and their dedication to it, and it certainly is relevant. I think there are so many other issues that I just mentioned that outweigh that benefit that we need to consider. And that's why I think keeping it the way it is right now, they're doing a great job, folks. That's what we need to think of. There's not enough benefit to change for me.
So a process question. What is our process, given this information, moving forward?
So this is the last report, and so we are going to have to make we're going to have a vote. and the vote is going to have to be multiple. Either one choice has to be no change. Either we have one other choice or we have multiple other choices. And I think the question before us tonight should be, do we have two choices or do we have three or four, right? And then I think we need to have a vote, but not right now, right? Because we need to think about everything that we've heard tonight. And so we certainly wouldn't want to vote, at least my feeling, the very next meeting, right? There's one more meeting after that in November, and there's one in early December. I personally feel like we've spent a year, and so if we can't make our minds up by the end of November, enough is enough. So I would say that that's when we should vote. At least that's my proposal. And that the vote should be no change versus, I would say, one other alternative, but let's see how that conversation goes. Does that sound right?
Just to clarify, November 20th would be the board meeting. And yeah, we're at the point, the sooner the better. If it goes much later, it would impact, we want time if there is a change, so.
So I'll be bold and make a motion if that's all right. Oh, sorry,
Well,
Mark.
I think we should just leave it up for discussion. That's just my own, instead of any motions yet. But I also think that we need to vote on the date of the implementation. So if, Tom's going to say we need to get ready, then it's going to be, August 27th of 2019. That has to, if there's no impact, then there's no impact. But we also have to talk about that in the process.
You mean, would it happen next year or the year after?
If it happens
Right.
next year or the year after.
Right. Right, and I think actually that, again, if we were going to change anything, I would like to hear from you guys, if we have enough time in 6 months to change, or do we need another year? That we would, I think, rely on your expertise.
Yeah, and we started talking about this week more, because we always said we hoped, I'd say, that last May we'd have a decision, and then it was too big. There's too much information. So it's not to fault anybody that we continued, because there was the issues with privates and finding out more information. There is an element, I will admit, that Ann and I met Monday morning and looked at each other like, oh, there's a lot of stuff. Anything like this with an implementation, and Mark made a point about late school, about graduation requirements. Ann has to shift right now. Basically, once tonight's meeting is over, I'm directing her, you're chairing this committee now.
You heard it here first.
Yeah, and with all of us, as we look at high school graduation requirements, so that's going to be a major piece. So that's a fair question about when would be best for implementation. And
how those new high school requirements will affect the times as well, because, you're going to have more
I think
credits.
we'll have a better idea if you vote for no change, obviously there's no change. If you vote for a change, once we have an idea of that, then I think we'll have an idea of how big the elephant is. And no matter what do? You eat it one bite at a time. So we'll see how it goes from there. But it's certainly, I'm never going to argue for less planning time for anything with a school system's like an aircraft carrier. It's hard to turn quickly. But with that being said, December does still give us half of a school year. So that's the other piece.
Can I just also clarify about the credits? This doesn't change the length of the school day. It just moves the school day, correct? So whatever we're going to adjust.
So long as we don't follow the Greenwich model.
Right, exactly. Assuming we're not going to cut instructional time, right? So that the change in credits we're going to have to face regardless of whether we change the time or not.
That's correct.
Also, in a process piece, and I'm glad you mentioned, my personal opinion, I do not want a false facade like Greenwich did with this, eye candy of having no instructional period. That's just, it's not fair to the students. It's not fair to our public. If we're going to, we have an academic standard that we need to meet and must be maintained.
I'm up.
Absolutely, but I think Deb.
All right, yeah, thank you. We've had a lot of back and forth. This is my first comment, so let me go back to saying thank you. We've all got one of the neat things about the Board of Ed is we've all got our different specialties and backgrounds. Being in business and operations, I look at this, great job. And I know there's lots of little bits and pieces in there that we haven't discussed because it's inappropriate in this report to include all that minutia that will have to be addressed at some time. But thank you so much. It's also important that we not confuse the public comment with what's in this report. This is what we focus on. It's nice that we get public comment, but that's not the report. That's not what I'm here to talk about. I appreciate the input. I can take it or leave it, as an elected member of the board. But as a Board of Ed member, this is what I'm focused on. I don't see hyperbole here. This is it. This is good stuff. Thank you very much. I do have a couple of quick questions. Rob, you said you were going to keep it brief. I'm going to be briefer, I think. Anne, you said something early on talking about option 1, and I just want to make sure I understood it. You talked about like a default sport start time if the two teams can't agree. What was that time?
That's 3:45.
3:45. Okay, just like you try an arm wrestle and we can't get to it. Okay. Here's what it is, 3:45.
School wants, school, has 3:30 on the calendar. We call them up. We say, hey, 4:15 would really work. They say, maybe, maybe not. But if they're no, and we cannot agree, it's 3:45.
Okay.
And that's the CCC rules, and I did have Jason at a meeting at the end of last year ask people if they were willing to shift that, and they started talking about shifting it earlier in some certain segments of the group, and there wasn't a universal thing to move it later, but there are also people that say we'll be amenable. I know certain superintendents, principals, and athletic directors, if I call them, they'll work with us. I know some that won't.
Thank you. And remind me, my kids are in high school now. Elementary school right now starts at 8:35. What's that time where we say the kids can't be dropped off at school before, is it 8:20? 8:20, so it's 15 minutes prior to school start time. So would that still apply here if we had elementary school start at 9 o'clock? They could be at school no earlier than 8:45? Is that right? So we're not telling parents that you need to be there at 9 o'clock. They do have the option to drop their kids at as early as 8:45. Is that correct?
Yes, our committee never discussed a change in those 15 minutes before. We never looked at
But
that. I wouldn't anticipate
It's probably
a change.
something we'd stick with.
Yeah.
Right, okay. So well, 9 o'clock sounds like I got to drop the kids at 9 o'clock. Well, not necessarily. You could drop them as early as 8:45 if that works. We understand that changes would be needed in a parent's schedule and all. Okay. Did we talk anything, does open choice busing come into play of this at all?
It depends. Our open choice busing, at the end of the day, has a habit of not being there on time, for our elementary schools especially. Tends to get there about 20 minutes afterwards to 25 minutes afterwards. Now, that's because they're traveling on 84. They're not just coming. So if it stayed like I said to somebody, we just won't tell them we're going later and then they'll be on time. So if it still came at the exact same time, it wouldn't be an issue. If you extrapolated it out and they were coming at that point, then you're talking about 4:30, then you're talking about rush hour, that would be an issue. So that's something that, we'd hope, and they're working on it, and I talk to them frequently, as does Rosina and Andy. Pickup specifically at the end of the day is an issue.
On the other end, though, it might help them as not having to catch a bus so earlier in the morning? So.
Maybe.
Okay. Great, thank you.
Can I I'm arguing against myself here, so I would love some pushback, but I agree with you, Rob, that the only choice is, if we're going to change, is 1 or 2, that 3 doesn't make sense, much as sounds nice to sleep in. And all the science says 8:30 is better for high school, and I understand that But I have to say, reading this, it strikes me that the 8:10, the alternative 2, actually might be far less negatively impactful, if that's a way to say it, than the 8:30. I know it would be better to do option 1 for student health, but I'm just going to argue that realistically, that there's going to be far less conflict if number 2 were the one that we went with rather than number 1. So I'm just going to put it out there. You should feel free to argue, but I would say that for me, the 2 choices would be, that we would vote on would be no change or number 2. So,
Again, Dave, I appreciate your comment. I'm glad that you look at this, but this board works for the public, and we work and has been influenced by public statements. We have. You voted in certain things over the last, not you maybe, but in the last 5 years I've been on, the board has been influenced by the public. So yes, they're here, they're making public comments, we work for them. And I'm glad that you were able to decipher through, but I just want to make sure that what you hear sometimes is, and hence why I said that. So we go back to this science, you say middle school or scenario 2. Well, middle school gets impacted again by that adolescent time where, so where your greatest impact is, and I've said this before, our greatest impact is at the middle school. And I understand that brains operate into the 20s. And in fact, the military did a thing on it too, but adolescence actually stops at 18, 19 by definition, not brain development and anything like that. If that were the case, no one would be in the workforce at 8 o'clock in the morning or any earlier. But we're talking about adolescence here, and the middle school and scenario 2, you say the least impactful, but again, the science that was presented to us indicates that adolescence, and we're changing that to earlier. So
absolutely. Let me just clarify one piece about the science. It is absolutely true, and again, we heard this today, that middle school age kids have an impact too. But in fact, the greatest conflict between time and brain function is high school. Ideally, it's important for middle school too, but the most important time, according to the science, is the high school. So that's why I totally agree with you. I wish we could move everything back. And actually, I'm hoping, because there were so many people from Connecticut at this meeting who all seemed quite enthusiastic, that there's going to be pressure to push the state to make some kind of statement, in which case we don't have to negotiate with anybody because everybody's in the same boat. So I actually totally agree with you. I wish we could do it all, but given the fact that we can't do that yet, given the reality of everything else, that's the only reason that I'm advocating for this one, especially if we can make it 7:40 instead of 7:35 or whatever.
Well,
but I do just want to say that for me, just to disagree with you a bit, Rob, I see all these changes, but it seems to me that communities adapt. To me, the health of our kids, most of the kids, the vast majority of our kids, all of whom have the similar kind of brain structure, so far outweighs the inconvenience of these other things. Not to minimize those, but to me, that's the real pressure, and that's why I would argue that we should change if we can.
But that's your opinion, right? I mean,
of course,
right?
it's my
Okay,
opinion.
because I would argue the exact opposite opinion, that it shouldn't outweigh the community of people, because I think that is a significant population, and communities can adapt. But it's a question of, are you adapting for a majority benefit or a minority benefit?
Right, and that's what I was saying, that the science says that the majority of students, the vast majority of students would benefit from this. And since that's our agenda, is to help the majority of students, that's exactly why, in my opinion, it is worth changing. I hear you that there's costs, but to me the costs are worth it in order to get the benefit for the kids. But obviously we can disagree on the balance, but I was just clarifying what.
And so again, I don't want to just focus on one thing of like the science is saying the majority of people benefit, because I think based on the report that they've done, in the real world, there are a lot of things that the different populations of this town that will not benefit from the change based
But our
on
job
the
is the
change.
schools.
Hmm?
Our job is to deal with the schools and the
Well,
kids'
these are-
education.
I'm talking about the kids in the schools. Like, again, going back to what I said earlier, please don't forget it, is that there are kids that are involved in a variety of things, whether it be after-school activities, and I'm not just talking about sports, or they have after-school jobs, or things. Sure, Cheryl, communities can adjust, but I think it should be based on the fact that you are impacting a majority of kids in a positive way. And again, you keep going back to one thing, the science says a majority of kids benefit. I'm arguing that I'm not so certain that in West Hartford's case, that outweighs everything else that I just mentioned. That's just my
Right,
opinion.
no, I agree. That's what I'm saying. We clearly disagree on this, but I just wanted to, I agree with I understand what you're saying. That's exactly my point. To me, the balance is on the majority student health. But you're absolutely right. Again, other places that have done this did studies about jobs and things like that, and there didn't seem to be a conflict. Jobs were flexible. But again, I'm not saying that they are. I'm just saying that, to me, the balance falls exactly in the reverse of where you see it. And that's just, we can just agree to disagree on that point.
Well, Cheryl, because in the spring, you said if there was a dollar amount attached to it that was X, you wouldn't vote for it anyway. We couldn't responsibly. So there is a dollar amount attached over health. So the soapbox that you're using right now, just be clear what you.
No, what I'm saying is what we now know.
Because it is an impact financially, because it says they cannot accommodate the later state times, Rockledge and Cornerstone. And that is a financial impact, which you spoke about in the spring. It may not be on this budget, but it is in our town budget, okay? Because Rockledge is a public entity, just as is Cornerstone. So if they cannot accommodate it, those numbers have to be considered. So just keep that in mind. And then also, one argument I didn't make is that, okay, let's use that your meeting today that you went to talks about the impact of high school students, right? And we talked about this a little earlier. So your impact is for your elementary, not your elementary, but your middle school, your physical and psychological changes, which are the greatest between 9 and 12. So then they wean after 16. So then your next impact is, let's say, 13 to 16, and then 17 to 18. So your freshmen and sophomores have more impact on this sleep study than your juniors and seniors, because as they get older, they get out of adolescence, their brain development, all that. So if you're looking at the populace as a whole, again, half of it is a greater impact than the other half. So it's not the majority, again, on the adolescents' mental health issues and over the start times. It's, because again, high school 4 years, your freshman and sophomore are impacted more because they're in the later part of adolescence, and as they move out of adolescence in a junior and senior year. So again, when you look at the population that's affected by science, is your freshmen and sophomores and your middle schools. So when you make that decision, are you making it on the impact of freshmen and sophomores mostly, or the school whole in general when those kids are leaving their adolescence years and your juniors and seniors? Because that's the science.
It's not the science as I understand it, but that's a different question.
So I'm going to jump in. So looking at option 1 and option 2, and in terms of the school start time committee, and I appreciate you and the committee and all the hard work that you've done, and looking at the districts that have implemented this, and then some of those districts that have even tweaked it based on the time that they implemented it. There's a lot of good stuff here, I have to say, in this report, and then listening to all the feedback that you've brought back before the board. Great stuff and great information for us to sort of debate over. But at the same time, I find it as a balance. I really do. I do, I've had experience with my own children and also a bunch of other high schoolers, not just in this district, but, across this particular region in terms of the high school start time and how it's extremely early, not just early where they have to be at the bus for those students that take the bus, but they have to get up super early in order to do that. And especially the kids that are involved in extracurricular activities, whether it's sports, debate, a bunch of other stuff that they have to do, study, and prepare for. So it is a difficult nut to crack that's before us. And I understand those kids that also have part-time jobs that they're committed to saving for college or, some other types of things. I did have a question earlier on, though, in terms of how does this impact on the late bus if we do a later start time? Because if you have a later start time and kids are staying after school for whether it's sports or extra help or what have you, and they have to take the late bus and now are starting later, so they're going to be in the dark, and if they have younger siblings, so it's a ripple effect, if you will. But I'm still sort of leaning, just based on experience to the earlier start time. I don't know if I'm convinced that we need to go as early as 8:30. I'm sort of like on the fence looking at something maybe in between. But I do feel strongly if we make a decision that we should probably stick to that decision and not tweak, because we're going to throw everybody off and the families off. And the other piece that's very concerning for me is childcare. We have a lot of single-family households in town, and how will that impact them in terms of adjustments, especially if people have to be at work a certain time, and employers may not be flexible in terms of allowing that employee to come in later because of the delayed start time. So those are some of my concerns, but, I do feel strongly that we should look at tweaking, because just listening to even our student reps who are enduring this day in and day out and listening to their cohorts, it's significant and it's impactful, and I've seen it. And just as he said, when there is delays, it's like a totally different student. And they're ready, unlike, if you're a parent or parents that you're kind of, okay, you've given them the first wake-up call, and then you've given them the second wake-up call, and by the third wake-up call, you're like kicking them out the bed and out the door. So those are some of my concerns, but I'm really interested in learning in terms of how does that impact those students who rely on the late bus because they still want to participate in school activities.
Much like my response to Dave's question about the drop-off 15 minutes earlier, we expect everything like that would shift, appropriate to the delay or the later release time. We're talking about release times in the afternoon. And I think we're always going to be concerned in a couple months of the year about, students walking from buses home. So you can anticipate, I think the middle school late bus currently is at 4 o'clock. So they're actually earlier, so that won't be a problem there. I believe the high school late bus is 1 hour after, so now you're talking about a 4 o'clock late bus. Dusk, again, not trying to overstate, but there are some hours you'd be concerned that it's civil twilight. And you just want to make sure I think for me, one of the things we could do is check our guard schedule, make sure we have all those pieces in place, and maybe work with our bus company about educating them that, we are dropping off at a harder to see time. So we did not study or recommend any changes in the late bus time, because an hour is about what the kids are going to need to pack up, meet with their teachers, get some extra help, or attend a meaningful club activity and get on a bus. Anything much less than that, it will really be hard to have a meaningful meeting or a meaningful session and then get back out to the bus, because that's probably about 50 minutes of meeting time after you go to your locker, go to your class, and then get out to the bus. So we anticipated a 1 hour delay in everything. No, that scenario would not affect the middle school. A little bit the high school, and elementary we've discussed.
I was wondering, do we currently pay to use Cornerstone, Rockledge, and Veterans, or do we get those facilities free of charge for our teams?
We basically free of charge. There's some give and take depending on the time. It's part of the agreement. The issue at the golf course is that leagues start at 3 o'clock. which is where the golf course makes their money. So they've been pretty clear, you have to be off the tee box before 3 o'clock comes. So that's a definite thing for matches. That's a big one. Veterans, again, because of the way it works, we don't always get optimal times anyway for practicing for hockey, for both males and females. Cornerstone, we have very, very large, especially girls' swim teams. And so pushing it later does push it into when people are coming in necessarily. So, they typically want us out earlier depending. Yeah.
So the reason I ask is that we could be forced into the situation of looking for a different place for those teams to practice and have their matches and their meets. And so that could be an added expense if we're not already paying for it. But I wasn't sure whether we were already paying for those facilities. Oh, I'm still questions, but
I was just going to say, we would reach out back to them again with some proposals once you solidified time to see if there's any wiggle room. We wouldn't stop trying, put it that way, because they are convenient locations. Our children aren't going off to, let's say, Newington or an ice rink in Avon. They're right here. They're local. Their parents can pick them up. They do have to get home and do their homework after that. So we would reach out to them. We'd look at once you have a specific time and, are there any adjustments that can be made, even small ones? Practices could be shaved a little bits here and there, but certainly it wouldn't be meaningful if you were regularly saving practice in half to 30 minutes or an hour. That would really impact those teams, and then we think we would have to look at an option outside of them. But I just wanted to make clear, we would keep working with, Jason Siegel is very willing to go back and ask them again and see what creative solutions there could be, but there is that scenario.
Thank you. So I want to align my comments with those of Cheryl's. I think ideally we would be able to start high school at 8:30. We know that's what's best for the kids, but I have a lot of concerns about before school care and that option for working families in our town, as well as the after-school activities, whether it's sports or any after-school activity under option 1. So I think that I would then move to option 2. My concern under option 2, besides that it doesn't quite get us where we know we want to be, is actually the transition from 5th grade to 6th grade, where you now are starting school a full hour earlier that year. And that seems like a big jump for a 10, 11-year-old to make. However, I don't think we should let perfect be the enemy of the good. And given that, and given what our goals are for our students and families in town, I would recommend that we move forward with a discussion of option 2 and option 4. And I guess I'll make a motion for that.
I would, I'm interested in option 1 myself. I think we should try for what we'd like to achieve here. I have a concern about just moving the middle school students back 20 minutes earlier. I know neither of these are perfect. We knew that when we suggested these times back in May. But option 1 is where we'd like to be. Option 2 is a lot of compromise. I say let's give option 1 a try and discuss it out a bit more. Mark, I do want to thank you again. I'll do some clarification. Sometimes you do. That yes, I certainly do listen to the folks who are speaking, but as you mentioned, pulling out the hyperbole and separating things is important. So that's good as well. We certainly appreciate all the public speakers. I know there have been times where there's been a large group or a small group, and we've all said that it's not fair to judge a public opinion based on just who happens to come here to speak, and it was within the 7-speaker limit on one night. So that's important as well. Mark, I think back to the vote on imagery a few years ago. Certainly there was a lot of conversation on that. And one of the options the board had at that time was just to leave things like they were. But they didn't. They took a step, a bold step in the right direction. It also was a compromise, though, wasn't it? And that may be what we do here. But I would like to see us discuss, or at least vote on scenario 1 and 2.
So I'm more interested in the golf team now, too, because they need to practice every day, and not only on matches. And if you're getting out of school at such a time, when will they practice? How would it impact them? What do we do with our golf team at that point? Because if they can't get there before 3 o'clock, and they can't in either scenario, they would have to leave school early, leaving academics, and that'd be every day.
I talked to Jason about that. It's more on match days specifically. I mean, that's the biggest issue is on match days. Frankly, option one on match days, I don't know. We'd have to find another golf course. I think that's clear for matches. Practice is typically off the driving range as it is, so they're not necessarily out on the course for practice. That's a couple times they're on the course. And they can also stagger what holes they go out onto. So the practice is fungible. It's the actual matches where they're going off against another team. So it's kind of it's similar to everything. It's the matches and the games that would be the bigger issue.
Okay, I want to say one other thing. I feel like we've gone off into the weeds. It's obvious to me, and I'm just going to say it, that scenario 2 seems to be what the majority of the board is leaning towards. I have grave concerns, and I wish the majority of the board felt the same way about the costs. We really don't have our hands wrapped around in a strong way that this is going to be a minimal cost to our budget. And Tom is on record as saying that he's not going to cut for this. So now we're just adding to the budget. When I know we talked about it earlier, Cheryl, that, it seemed like a majority of the board, at least yourself, was on record of if there's any significant cost, then this is a non-starter. And I felt like other people on the board were kind of that way too. And now there's like this, well, I have concerns about option number 2, lukewarmness thing, but I'm going to push forward without really having a strong sense of all the financial impacts. And I feel like we're ignoring what was said earlier about the non-financial impacts to our community, just because we feel that getting kids an extra 30, 40 minutes of sleep because the science says that is going 75% of the way is a good thing. And we're just going to ignore a golf team, a swim team, a hockey team, play before school, chess after school. All these populations of people are just being swept into the science argument of, well, that's the majority and that's what we're going to do. And I'm extremely frustrated by that. I think we have a great program as it exists right now. It works. Yeah, kids can be tired first thing in the morning. My wife's a teacher. I hear it from her. But we have a ton of kids going off successfully to all the Ivy League schools, as our superintendent just told us, as well as a majority of other amazing colleges and universities. We have year in and year out fantastic test scores. What is the problem that we need to rejigger this system for now in option 2 by a mere 30 or 40 minutes? I just don't get it. There are all these unknowns. There are all these potential expenses. There are all these people that we are going to upset for 30 or 40 minutes because the science is saying it. I wish that we were looking at it more complete picture of all these other things that I feel like you've kind of given short shrift to, and you're just wanting to move forward with option 2. And I wish that, and I hope that maybe opinions will change over the course of the next 30 to 40 days before an actual vote comes in. Because I think that we are really, really messing with people's lives here in a way that maybe you're not fully appreciating. And that's just how I feel.
Tom, for me, would you tell me, with the current schedule for high school, when do the golf tournaments or what their games begin?
They have to be out before
A match,
3.
rather.
The matches have to start before 3 o'clock. So there's dismissals for golf occasionally now when they're going. I mean, that's one of the sports you see more dismissals for in the springtime because even away they have to be out. So
typically, when are they dismissed now?
Oh, typically now it's at the regular end of the school day.
Okay, but
And-
when they do have to be dismissed early, what time frame is that?
It depends on where they're playing, because sometimes you're playing at a course a good distance away.
So what's the
there's-
furthest away school that they play?
We play Yale
Girls play-
Smith.
okay.
So it could be in the state, there's the state tournament where the state tournament, in fact, is an all-day tournament, so that's a separate issue with multiple sports. Typically, for the golf team, you're looking at a 1:45 dismissal if it's a distance away.
Can you remind me, the sports, they're extracurricular activities, is that correct?
Yes.
Yes, okay. And do we give credit for being in sports? Is credit earned for that?
We don't.
We
Although
don't.
I have questioned that,
Yeah.
that we don't for that, but we do for band.
Right, we do.
So that
Okay.
to me that's a point. Yeah, no, we do
All
not.
right, all right, thank you.
Moms and dads get credit when they get free college, so, sports, all right, so they're,
Touche.
So the other thing too is, and I've mentioned this before, that's not that rare. We've had quite a few kids just from Hall last year, just from Hall, because I'm obviously a Hall dad, had quite a few, even Division III, Division IIs, and stuff like this. They work around it. It's not all sports, but they get the academic piece because of the sports. So anyway, it doesn't mean, but I've said this before, and this is a case, and I think this is the absolutely designed for this statement, is we are a leader in many things, and we have been, and we continue to do so. Continuous improvement. We have one of the better school systems in the state. We're ranked nationally. There's a time to be a leader, and we do it every day. These people, our teachers, our administration, they do it every day. And there's a time to follow. No one immediately around us, and that's where the crux come in, are doing this. So when you have to coordinate, and all the coordination that's going to take place, there's no one around us. So if they said this part of the CCC was going to change and everybody has to do it by state mandate, there's a time to be a follower and there's a time to be a leader. And being a follower is often a very good leader. So we have to think about the impacts. If no one follows us and we're the only one out there, constant schedule manipulation will take place from now until whenever. So sometimes a follower is also a good leader.
I just want to reply to your point, Rob, because I don't actually think it's fair to say that we're not considering it. I would say the chess team is fine. The chess group is fine. Practices, you said, are fine. We're not actually talking about 1,000 kids every single day. We're talking about matches of some teams and of certain teams and certain events. We're not talking about after-school programs. We're not talking about any of those things which are in fact going to go on. So it's not that I think anybody here is not mindful of those things. It's that in fact I think that is when you come down to it, a far smaller group of people than the proportion of students that will be benefited, again, according to the science, from this kind of move. So again, I think we are all thinking about this. I just don't think that the numbers affected are as great as you think, and that we'll have to see. If I'm wrong, I'm wrong, but I just don't see it. If practices are fine, if a lot of these events, after school activities are fine, but they
determined that Greenwich is not doing clubs right now. They haven't determined the club scenario after.
No, go ahead.
I'll qualify that for you. That in that opportunity block, right? Opportunity block, from 2:45 to 3:15. The athletes are dismissed at 2:45. The children who are remaining, they can have extra help. This is what I heard today. Study hall. They are considering having some official clubs meeting in that time. I don't think that means that their other clubs don't meet at 3:15, but they're trying to, it appears to me that, and from what I heard today, that they are trying to determine what are official things that can happen in that last half hour. So it's not that their clubs went away. It's just some are determining the clubs that can run in that half hour. That doesn't mean to say that other clubs can't start at 3:15.
And could you repeat what you said earlier, because correct me if I heard you wrong, that you said that you were uncertain that you either you didn't have the conversations or you just didn't know how certain after-school activities would be impacted in this town. You mentioned scouts, for example, but you mentioned several different.
Right.
What were they again?
When we had our stakeholder group, they went out and they talked to groups like in businesses, and they said, well, if you don't have a time, you'd have to come back and tell us the time. We can probably adjust, but we don't know until we. There were other groups that they went to. I said I threw some options: scouting, karate. I heard today one of the school districts said there was a very popular dance club a dance studio in town, and that you would want to go and ask them. When we first asked them, they said, without a time, we can't tell you. You'd have to come back to us with a time for us to tell you that impact. And so that's Little League and karate and dance and all of the other things that you can imagine our children sign up for.
That's what I'm getting at. Okay, like I don't pretend to be an expert and know, and I don't think you can either, that how many people are in these different after-school activities, and that to just simply, again, broad brush, be like, well, I think that the number of kids that benefit from the science will far outweigh the kids in all these different activities. How do you know that?
I don't,
'cause
but I'm assuming.
So you're assuming.
No, I am assuming.
You're assuming.
Would you let me finish my sentence?
Go right ahead. You're
Thank you.
assuming.
I am assuming that groups like karate or scouts that serve West Hartford children would not actually start before West Hartford children are available. So that if the kids are available at 3, they'll start at 3. If the kids are available at 4, they'll start at 4. That's what I'm assuming.
Okay. I just don't agree with that assumption. And you have no basis in reality in that. So, I mean, you can assume that those people will move everything so the kids can accommodate, but there are going to be families that will be impacted that they simply won't be able to make the move because you have 2 working parents, and so all of a sudden they can't get out of their jobs, or they don't have the babysitter help, or whatever it is. It's not, I refuse to assume that it's just 1 or 2 people, and that you are making statements like they are fact, that you are certain that the science argument is the winning argument. And it's an assumption. It is simply an assumption. And if everybody in the majority on this board is going to take that assumption and run with it.
So, as somebody in the majority on this board, I'm not embarrassed to say that I believe in science, and I believe that we should try to accommodate what science is telling us. And
I didn't say I didn't believe it.
Okay. So, in an effort to do that, I think we all need to be a little bit open-minded. Change is hard. I get that. I am somebody who lived by routine when my kids were in daycare and then elementary school. I mean, we had everything written down to at 7:18, this is going to happen. At 7:20, this is going to happen. But people can adjust. We're flexible. And I think it's a little hyperbolic, to borrow Mark's turn of phrase, to think that Boy Scouts, which is at a school,
Just an example, not everything.
are going to start before there are any scouts available for scouting. I think that's hyperbole. I think that there are some situations where perhaps religious school, dance classes that are not based in a school or based because of a school, the way that scout troops are, that might need a little bit of adjustment. But I don't think that that means that we don't try something, that we don't say, it's November, by the time we vote on this, we want to give the families in town, the transportation providers, the before and after school providers, the after school activity type people, we're going to give them 9 months to figure out what they want to do next August. I don't think that just because change is hard, that means we don't try to make a change if that's what the science supports. That's my opinion.
That's not my argument, though, and so you're twisting my words. And I just disagree that change. You're right. Change is hard. I agree with you. My argument, and it's been the argument since day one, is: are we changing just for the sake of change, and more importantly, are we changing for a minority view? So, again, I'm not comfortable sitting here, and maybe you all are, and that's fine because you're the majority. But I'll stand on my on that belief that there are a lot of people in this town, because I've heard from some of them. They email me. They come up to me when I see them in town, and they're like, I simply don't take the time to come to the meetings because my life doesn't allow it, or I can't always, remember to send a message when I want to. There are a lot of people in this town that just are super, super busy. The people that show up at these meetings are the super, super passionate ones. God bless them. So my argument is not that I don't believe in science. I'm a big believer in science. So those never words that came out of my mouth. I'm not comfortable thinking that the majority wants this change in this town and that it benefits a majority of people in our population of students in this town. There are a lot of unknowns. So if we had a concrete plan in place, Deb or Cheryl, that you're so certain that this plan is ready to go, then I would probably be more comfortable. I just feel extremely uncomfortable that we are impacting people, the unintended consequences thing. And I get the sense that several of you spoke tonight to that end, but then you just said, but I'm leaning towards with this option. So I just caution you to maybe be more thoughtful and think longer about what we don't currently know. So why don't we take more time to hear out on it if that's what you want to do? But at this point, it's if you want to make a decision, it's making a decision. Go right ahead.
I appreciate all that's been shared. I do have a question. Just reflecting back on this first being presented in November, and we're almost approaching the year anniversary of this coming up, and we certainly have had many avenues of information shared with us, from literature reviews that you have shared, from presentations, from speakers, from emails, from surveys. So there certainly is a wealth of information to consider as we ultimately make a decision. Certainly that information has come from many sources, so I appreciate that. Question I have, from the conference you went to today, and also information you have received from Greenwich, recognizing some of the challenges they've had, did they speak today or at any point in time of wanting to go back to the original start time?
Newtown, we asked that question directly, and Newtown made a switch in their high school schedule from 7:20 to 8 o'clock, and they said they would not go back. Wilton made this switch in 2004, I want to say, could have been 2005, around that time period, and they originally switched to 8:15, and I think they later adjusted to 8:20. They have not gone back. Greenwich only had 1 year of implementation. They did have, I asked the question, why did you push back the end time from 3:15 to 2:45? And they had enough implementation challenges where they made that choice. They didn't push back their start time, but they chose to push back their end time, which resulted in this opportunity block, which is resulting in 30 minutes less of instruction. I don't know if they made any other adjustments to take care of that. I didn't ask that question. I could ask that question, but so I would say Newtown would not go back. Wilton would not go back at this point. And Greenwich hasn't gone back, but they've had to make significant adjustment. Did I answer that? Okay.
Well, I think we've covered all the bases of our conversation. So can I propose, I don't know that we need a motion to make a motion, but can I propose that we put 3 options on the table for a vote on November 20th or whatever it is, that option 1 here, option 2 here, and option 4 here?
So I'll first withdraw my motion from before, and then now we have a clean slate.
Can I ask, do we need to vote on option 4? That would be the default if option 1 and option 2 didn't pass.
Well, you're going to have to be direct about how you vote. The truth is, with 3 options, it makes it more difficult, because what you're going to have to do is do 2 discussions, really. And if you don't want to do it now, if you want to do it then, that's fine. But then your question is, change it all or not change, and then if it were not change, it's done. If it's change, then well, it's an yes, but it's an interesting issue, because you could all vote, yes, I agree with changing, but you could all vote yes on whatever the first one presented to you was. So It's really a yes or no.
Yeah, so it is kind of like we could do a vote, option 1, yes or no. Another vote, option 2, yes or no.
Yeah, but you could get multiple yeses.
Yes.
Is my question.
Well,
Okay.
so what that suggests is that maybe we need to have the conversation between 1 and 2 now. That is to say, that even regardless of whether you think there should be a change or not, I think, if we changed, would we prefer 1 or 2? And then we can go down to 2 votes, we can go down to 2 choices for November. We're either going to approve whatever the option is, or we're not. And exactly as you said, if the majority says no, then no.
Tom, I just want to be clear, there is zero financial impact except for the $94,000.
There's, from what I can see, and I cannot make that absolute promise, and I'm sorry, I'd love to make that promise to you. Not that we can foresee that's an obvious impact besides 94. We've dug into it, but things come up, things change. I don't anticipate there being, the 94,000 is a worst case scenario. So again, that to me is that's the biggest that number is going to be, is I guess what I would say.
So in the spring, when we were talking $500,000, that was what?
That was before we had gone through every bus route with every private school and looked at, okay, what is the actual start time, leave time there? How do we change it? So we spent a lot of time this summer, and I give credit to Ann bringing it up, and Andy and myself and Chip going through everything this summer and really getting it down to, there's 4 that are still a question. The others we know, there's 4 that's a question. There's 4 that if we didn't change anything, we'd have to pay for. That would be the way I'd look at it. I'm sorry, I just don't want to make promises that, I've tried to stay out of absolutes.
So do you want to make your case that 1 is?
I'd like to make a motion that we vote on option 1 or option 2 as the option to consider going forward.
We can certainly vote now. I just meant, do you want to make a
Certainly
case?
do.
for-
My son's applying for college right now, and when you're doing college where you got to reach school, and then you got, what's the one that, not a safety, but, I don't know that safety is the right word here.
Right fit.
Right fit. And, option 1, that's what we've been talking about. That's what everybody's been saying, the impact. And I'm just looking at the middle school start time going earlier. It's against what we wanted. Now, if we vote down option 1, I got to go with option 2 or nothing, sure, I can consider it. But boy, right now, I'm looking at this, I'm like, yeah, we're West Hartford. I understand, we've been clear that there are challenges with it. But, if we're going to make a change, I would like to see us make a change.
I'm just going to argue with you slightly, just to make the other case, because I don't disagree with you about the ideal. I would just say that to make Rob's point, I think that putting the elementary schools that late does make a problem for them going home in the dark. And it seems to me elementary kids, of all the kids, we really need to be most careful of. So I'm a little bit concerned about that. I think high school at 8:30, although I wish it would work, until we get cooperation from the other places, the other sports teams, I think the impact is going to be significant, not only for students, but also for coaches. And so while I too think that we need to prioritize academics, and I too think that this would be an ideal thing, I think my fear is that this is, now I agree with Rob, I think that that in this case the disruption is so great that it would be very hard to move forward against all of that challenge. So again, while I agree with you in principle, I would argue that 2 is going to have a negative impact on fewer people, in which case I can argue with Rob.
She's using me as a pawn against you. Don't let her do it.
Exactly.
You remind me of the movie A Bridge Too Far, and you sound like option one is a bridge too far for you, huh? Well, I'll tell you what, if that's the case, I can see the writing on the wall. I will withdraw my motion.
Okay, well, the idealist among us is going to take a hit, and I totally hear you, believe me. So, if I understand you correctly, and we can go cry into some beer or something after the meeting, the choice in front of us in November will be, do we support option two on this page, or not? And if the majority says yes, then we do, and if the majority says no, then we keep it the same. Is that correct?
So
Okay.
moved.
Oh, do we have to make a motion, or do I just ask you to put this on put it on the agenda? Okay.
What's that, Mark?
This board moves by 7 people in this town.
The board is 7 people in this town.
7 people that come up that podium.
That's not fair.
No, and we've discussed before that clearly it's not just the number of people who come here. In fact, Rob made the point tonight that some people are busy and can't make it, but they have opinions, they send emails. So I strongly disagree with what you're saying, Mark. We were not moved by simply 7 people.
The agenda.
I strongly disagree,
They got on
Mark.
the agenda.
But like we've been
Wait.
saying around this table, it's not just these people. The same way that
people
Rob
put this on the
said that
agenda.
is passionate, that comes up to him, that are not in favor, those same folks that are in favor, who are passionate, has approached me. So the same way how you're arguing against, there are folks in this town that are in favor, that have approached
Understood.
me,
Yeah,
okay, as
I
a
get
board
that.
member.
But you didn't put it on the agenda because you saw somebody at Stop and Shop. Got on the agenda because of that podium. That's why. 7 people.
I disagree.
So I'll chime in for the power of civic engagement, and any 7 people who want to come forward to a board meeting and say, we would like the Board of Education to consider this issue. I think we should encourage the people who live in this town to come forward and tell us how they would like us to think about schools and any ideas that they have moving forward. And all of us who are elected should consider those ideas.
So moving on to approval of the minutes.
I want to make one other comment.
Oh,
I actually wasn't
okay.
done. I'm not talking to you guys. I'm talking to the camera. So those out there that do watch, if you ever were going to come into a meeting, this is the one to come into at our second meeting in November. If you really do feel strongly that you don't think that the school start time should change, you've got to come in, because frankly, that voice is not being heard. We have tried to have a discussion about it. It's obvious the way things are going. I implore you, spread the word. Come on in. Let us hear that you really feel that way, because otherwise it simply doesn't exist to them. Thank you.
And you don't have to wait until November 20th, because we also have a board meeting on November 7th.
And keep in mind that there are only 7 speakers allowed on one topic. Thank you.
Just to be clear, I agree. Let's not ask people to come in on November 20th. Let's say anybody who has a strong opinion who has not already told us, which we have heard many ways, please send us email. That's what they're for.
We did get plenty of emails.
Yes, we did.
Yeah. And a lot against.
About 1 in 7.
For clarification, the email address is boardmembers, with an S, all one word, boardmembers@whps.org. We counted. We did this already.
Presented it at the last meeting or the last several meetings.
But I will look it up and let you know what the number was. I mean, the exact number. But go ahead.
What I was going to say before, and now I feel even more compelled to say it, I was actually going to say, Dave, I'm proud of you for demonstrating what we all try to demonstrate in terms of speaking your voice, even if you may not be supported by others. So thank you for doing that in a respectful way, listening to what others had to say, and then respectfully challenging. Because I'm sure all of us recognize the importance that we play in terms of being role models for young people and respectfully listening, and even if it means agreeing to disagree, doing so in a way that is appropriate.
So I say let's shift from this to something we can be unanimous about,
I
which
make a
is
motion, we
approval of the
approve the
minutes.
minutes of the October 2nd board meeting.
Second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed?
No, I just was perplexed why she interrupted you.
Oh, I apologize. I was making the motion. I was just trying to move us along. I apologize if it appeared I was interrupting you.
In any case, we are unanimous that it passed. Okay, thank you so much. We have, I'm just going to assume we have no reports from boards or organizations, or you can save it till next time because it's really late, or information or discussions. We heard from the students. We have future business. We have the, Wednesday, November 7th, and I just remind you that it's a Wednesday because of Election Day. November 7th is our meeting at 7 p.m. And then Tuesday, November 20th, again at 7 p.m., which is when we will take this up. We'll take the 6:30 meeting time up, I think, the 7th, if we can. Yes. Is there a request for future agenda items? Okay. Comments from visitors. I have a request for one person who would like to make a comment. And just remember to say your name and your address.
Hi, I'm Diana McPherson. I live at 90 Whiting Lane, West Hartford. I'm here to represent myself, but I am not someone who has kids in school. My kids have been through the West Hartford schools and done well. I am very concerned about the disruption that appears to be unavoidable with any of the change options. So I'm going to urge that you vote for option 4 and make no change. I live right across the street from Whiting Lane School, and I can tell you that trying to move people in and out in 5-minute intervals is not a very easy task. I think they do a great job, but it's easy to sit here and say we'll do things at certain times. When you're on the ground, there's traffic, there's snow, there's fire engines, there's things that happen. The focus here has been on sleep science. However, I think that the disruption of families and the effect on the actual instructional education that our students are going to get has to be taken into consideration. And I'm very concerned that considering these change options is going to have a negative effect on those. And I also am concerned that our student transcript records for those students who are graduating during the change time may be wrecked because there will be differences in times. My understanding is that the class times may be different, that those who are looking for scholarships in athletics might have that impacted because they can't take part in certain kinds of athletic competitions because of timing or organization with other schools. So that, I think, is a concern. I think the costs and the problems with implementation on the list of steps that the committee reported was fabulous. I think all of those things are unanswered. And I think that having a list of money associated with some of those changes would make a big difference to town people who are going to have to pay taxes to support any increases in taxes caused by this change in our educational system. So I would very much like to have some specific numbers for the public to look at. They could be ballpark numbers, but they need to be somewhat supported and available so we can take a look at those. Again, it's back to the cost benefit. How much sleep gain are we really going to get by making on some of these options, fairly small adjustments. And I don't know whether the disruption to the town, to the public, to the parents, to the people who employ some of these students is worth that. I am wondering and worried about the negative effect on teachers. There was a lot of discussion about how they could manage their schedules and the things they have to do, and I'm not sure that that's been specifically worked on enough. I don't think the teachers, I don't know what they would say, but my guess is that they're going to be a little frantic about all of this. And I also think that you can't just kind of work with solving the problems. You really have to have some specifics down before you start making the change. Again, I know you can't do everything, but there's been an awful lot of flexibility and putting it off, and well, we'll talk about that after we get the motion passed. And I'm really worried that there'll suddenly be a lot of things that come up that will take more time, more money, and maybe you'll be implementing it in 2020. But I think you need more information. I think you've done a lot of studying, and I think you need some specific information. I think it's untested, unready, and not really ready to go yet. So I'm still an option 4 person. I think if we want our students to be leaders, you have to take change cautiously and make sure that it benefits the whole community. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay. Anyone else want to make a statement? Okay. Thank you so much. There is no executive session, and so I would love a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
All in favor? Aye. Poof, we're adjourned.